Chapter 1819. The two middle-aged men's aura was monstrous. Behind them was a sea of blood and a mountain of corpses. It was earth-shattering. They had no intention of hiding their strength. They immediately released their aura and alerted the reincarnation temple. They were obviously prepared to massacre the temple. Based on their profound cultivation levels, they might be able to do so. Chu Li frowned. He was now at the reincarnation temple and had just turned the tables on the reincarnation temple. He was still comprehending and cultivating in the reincarnation pagoda and had received guidance from Earth Lotus Monk. He could not just stand by and watch, so he had to take action. The middle-aged man was an Azura of a very high level. He might have reached rank 2. He had to be careful. The two men sized up the reincarnation temple for a moment and struck out at the same time. Outsiders could not see anything, but Chu Li could see the two blood-red auras penetrating the wall of the reincarnation temple with the omniscient mirror. Bang! There was a loud sound and the reincarnation temple seemed to tremble. A dark golden light rose outside the reincarnation temple and blocked the two red auras. The two middle-aged Azuras nodded, thinking that it was as they expected, so they continued to attack. Bang 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 bang. The two men's palm energy seemed to be endless. The reincarnation temple kept shaking. The dark golden light blocked the dark red aura. The dark golden light became brighter and flickered non-stop. The two middle-aged Azuras' palm energy was strange and profound. Each strike consumed a large amount of the dark golden light. Chu Li could see the 12 red-robed monks sitting cross-legged around Earth Lotus Monk. They pressed their palms on the ground. There were palm prints on the ground. They placed their palms on these palm prints and channeled their inner energy to activate the temple's protective formation. The reincarnation pagoda was the pivot of the temple's protective formation. Through the omniscient mirror, Chu Li felt that the 12 red-robed monks would not be able to hold on for long. They had used up most of their inner energy. Even if the 12 of them combined their strength and doubled their power, they were still a far cry from the two Azuras outside. Each of these two Azuras was on par with Earth Lotus Monk. Earth Lotus Monk could not handle them alone, not even with the help of the 12 red-robed monks. If he was not here today, it would be difficult for the reincarnation temple. Could this be fate? Earth Lotus Monk had planted good karma to produce such a good result. This made him feel an inexplicable respect for the karma of the world. Bam 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 bam. The reincarnation temple was shaking incessantly. The 12 monks in red solemnly circulated their powers to resist. The monks in the reincarnation temple began to assemble quickly. They did not come out to fight. Instead, they hid in several secret passages and waited for orders to evacuate. The entire reincarnation temple quietened down. Everyone was preparing to leave. Earth Lotus slowly opened his eyes and took a step to the top of the reincarnation temple. Standing there, he pressed his palms together and bowed. Namo Amitba, the Buddhist chant was long and resounded between heaven and earth. The gazes of the two Azuras landed on Monk Earth Lotus. Their gazes were like lightning, and 6 pairs of eyes clashed in the air. They stared at Earth Lotus Monk while waving their palms non-stop. 2 balls of dark golden splendor flickered and grew brighter and brighter wherever their palms struck. Chu Li pondered for a moment and suddenly appeared on the top floor in a flash. He stretched out his palms. Suddenly, a vast amount of spiritual energy from the outland descended. A pair of sun wheels and moon wheels appeared above his head. The sun wheel on the left and the moon wheel on the right. The vast spiritual energy landed on the 2 wheels, and they began to spin. The sun wheels and moon wheels rotated in circles like fish swimming in water. They formed a circular area 20 feet above Chu Li's head. Black and white blended together and were indistinguishable. The spiritual energy that entered this area was quickly converted into spiritual energy from the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture. It split into 12 rays and landed on the 12 palm print. The 12 monks in red were pushed back by an invisible force. They could not help but move out of the way. They stared at Chu Li with their mouths agape. They looked at the area formed by the sun wheels and moon wheels above his head. They looked at the 12 palm prints that were glowing with a dark golden light. Bam, 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 bam. The muffled sounds did not stop. The two Asuras sensed that something was amiss. Where their palm energy landed, the dark golden splendor dimmed again. It was like a lamp that was about to be extinguished. However, this dim dark golden splendor contained a powerful feeling. "Who's inside?" one of the Asuras asked in a hoarse voice. Chu Li remained silent. He continued to channel spiritual energy from the outland into the sun wheels and moon wheels. Then, he turned it into the earth matrix and reincarnation scripture inner energy and channeled it into the pagoda to maintain the great formation that protected the temple. The two Asuras could not do anything to the pagoda no matter how hard they tried. The great formation that protected the temple was as firm as a rock. The two Asuras were instantly furious. They sensed that the reincarnation temple must have strong reinforcements. Otherwise, with their cultivation level, they would have broken through the great formation and entered the temple to kill and destroy the reincarnation temple. Earth Lotus Monk looked up at the sky. As a celestial being, he was most sensitive to the spiritual energy from the outland. He could not help but feel speechless when he felt the spiritual energy that was as vast as the sea. He had already overestimated Chu Li, but he still underestimated him. Chu Li converted the spiritual energy from the outland and gained a deeper understanding of the earth matrix and reincarnation scripture. His mind gradually focused on the pagoda inside his body. He had already built a layer. At this moment, a trace of the earth matrix and reincarnation scripture inner energy fell on this layer of the pagoda. The originally illusory pagoda suddenly became a little clearer. It actually absorbed the earth matrix and reincarnation scripture inner energy. As the earth matrix and reincarnation scripture inner energy was injected, it was as if there was soil casting the pagoda, turning it from illusory to real. However, this pagoda had extremely high requirements for the earth matrix and reincarnation scripture inner energy. It would only accept it if it was not pure, and the requirement was huge. The spiritual energy from the outland was divided into 13 parts. One part fell on this pagoda, but it only made the pagoda a little clearer. According to his estimation, it would take a whole day of condensing and circulating spiritual energy to completely solidify this layer of the pagoda. His mind was focused on the pagoda, and he did not know how much time had passed. The two Asuras shrank their bodies and suddenly became thinner. They looked like skeletons, and the palm force that they struck out suddenly increased by several times. When each palm landed on the wall of the reincarnation temple, there would be 2 balls of dark golden splendor that would block them. The color of the dark golden splendor did not change. It was still dark, simple and vigorous, and contained a sense of power. After 100 palm strikes, the two Asuras turned around and left. They had already activated their secret skills, but they still could not break the defense of the reincarnation temple. If they continued to fight, they would only humiliate themselves. It was better to retreat as soon as possible, lest they were trapped. When they disappeared, Earth Lotus Monk heaved a sigh of relief and stepped back into the pagoda. He saw Chu Li holding up the sky with both palms. 2 balls of splendor were circulating in the void above his head. Torrential spiritual energy descended from the sky and landed on the 2 balls of splendor. Immediately, it turned into 13 streams of spiritual energy that were injected into the 12 palm prints and his own body. Chu Li seemed to be in a meditative state. No matter how much spiritual energy descended, he continued to activate the protective formation of the temple. Earth Lotus Monk shook his head and smiled. He did not expect Chu Li's earth matrix and reincarnation scripture to reach such a level. It was even better than him. It was no wonder that he could become the world's #1 master at such a young age. His comprehension was indeed amazing. When the 12 red-robed monks saw him, they pressed their palms together and bowed. Earth Lotus Monk waved his hand, indicating that they should not disturb Chuli. He did not expect that a wrong decision would turn hostility into friendship and actually save the reincarnation temple. If it were not for Chuli, even if Jining was there, the two of them would not be able to deal with the two Asuras. The reincarnation temple would be in danger. Boom! The entire reincarnation temple suddenly shook violently. Chuli suddenly woke up. Chapter 1820. Everyone was shocked and looked left and right. Earth Lotus Monk sensed that something was wrong with the wheel pagoda. He frowned and closed his eyes to sense it. He wanted to know where the commotion was coming from and why it was causing such a huge commotion. Was another strong enemy invading? After a while, he opened his eyes and looked puzzled as if he was thinking about something. There were no strong enemies outside the reincarnation temple. After the two Asuras left, they did not return. It seemed that they had scared off the other Asuras. The Asuras hiding in the dark also left with them and dared not come back. However, he noticed a strange phenomenon. The protective formation of the temple seemed to have become stronger than before, and its protective power had increased tremendously. It was obvious that Chuli had channeled too much spiritual energy into the Chakram Pagoda, which caused the protective formation of the temple to change. Perhaps when the formation was first set up, it needed a huge amount of spiritual energy to replenish it. Unfortunately, the ancestors' skills were not enough and could not replenish it. The younger generations were getting worse and worse. It was difficult to replenish the consumption. This time, Chuli had completely replenished the great formation that protected the temple. From now on, the reincarnation temple would be worry-free. Even if he was not around, there was no need to worry about the two tyrannical Asuras from before. They could not break the formation. As he thought about this, he turned and bowed to Chuli. "Thank you, almsgiver Chu." Chuli shook his head and smiled. "You're welcome, great master. I should be the one thanking you." He woke up after the wheel pagoda shook because the wheel pagoda had injected spiritual energy into it. This spiritual energy entered the first layer of the pagoda that was solidifying. Although the original first layer of the pagoda was supplemented by a huge amount of inner energy from the earth matrix and reincarnation scripture, it gradually became clearer. However, there was a limit to how clear it could be. It could not be completely solidified in a short time. Even if it was extremely clear, it might not be real. After this spiritual energy entered, he suddenly felt different. It was as if he had a seed that could finally blossom and bear fruit. It was not born out of thin air and forcefully solidified into reality. He knew that this seed was the core of the pagoda. It was the most important step for him to solidify the pagoda. Without this seed, even if it was extremely solid, it would still be a fake pagoda and not the real wheel pagoda. Therefore, he thanked him sincerely and not out of courtesy. Monk Earth Lotus smiled. If it weren't for almsgiver Chu, our reincarnation temple would have to move away for seclusion. Asura was powerful, but they acted in secret. Therefore, most people knew that the celestial beings had descended and caused chaos in the world, but they didn't know that Asura was also involved in it. They added fuel to the fire and took the opportunity to secretly destroy the Buddhist sects that were a threat to them. Chuli nodded slowly and asked, "Do you have any countermeasures, Great Master? Even the Grandmasters can't deal with the Asura state. What else can I do?" Monk Earth Lotus shook his head and sighed. One rises and one falls, the cycle of karma. This is the general trend, and a single person can't resist it. Chuli asked, "Are we just going to let them commit murder?" At this time, protecting yourself is the best strategy. Monk Earth Lotus said, "Prosperity leads to decline. Asura will not be complacent for too long." Chuli could not help but laugh. "You're lying to yourself, Great Master. The Asura realm has always been very powerful. Moreover, which realm has been conquered by the Asura realm? It has been like this for thousands of years, hasn't it? Namo Amitabha Buddha. Monk Earth Lotus nodded slowly. There was no doubt about this. The Asura realm was too powerful and had always been prosperous. However, he firmly believed that the Asura realm would not always be like this, and the Grandmasters would definitely be able to reverse the situation. Chuli looked at Monk Earth Lotus with a smile. Monk Earth Lotus sighed. Back then, the Founding Master had a prophecy that the Asura realm would be powerful, but in the end, it would still be destroyed by the Buddhist sections. The Asuras would rather believe in the Founding Master's prophecy, so the first one to be eliminated was the Buddhist sections. Chuli nodded slowly. This Founding Master must be a powerful person. The Buddhist heart technique and the Asura power technique were like water and fire, but the current Asura was like fire while the Buddhist sects were like water, far less powerful than the fire. It was like a cup of water to a cart of firewood, there was no way to restrain them. Monk Earth Lotus said, the Founding Master's divine power was unparalleled. He had severely injured the Asura in the Grandmasters, and the Asura respected him very much. Then where is this Founding Master? Chuli asked. Monk Earth Lotus shook his head. The Founding Master has already advanced to the Grandmasters. Chuli nodded thoughtfully. There had always been a saying about the 33 heavens. Although he did not believe it easily, he knew that there were more than 2 heavens. He suddenly had an idea and bowed with pressed palms. Great Master, I have something to do, so I will leave now. I will disturb you again in the future. The gate of the Reincarnation Temple is always open to you, almsgiver. You can come at any time, Monk Earth Lotus said. Chuli smiled and nodded, then suddenly disappeared. As soon as he disappeared, the 12 red-robed monks breathed a sigh of relief. The pressure that Chuli exerted on them was too great. Even though he had restrained his aura, after witnessing Chuli single-handedly controlling the temple protection formation, they felt that he was like a mountain that could not be looked at directly. Chuli suddenly appeared at Goddess Attraction Mountain. Dong Jinshin was in Chuli's basilica. In front of him lay a handsome young man who was barely breathing. It was Chuli's acquaintance, Zhou Jie. When he first entered the mountain, he had been given a lot of trouble, and Chuli had almost killed him. At this moment, Zhou Jie was not as spirited as he was back then. His eyes were closed, his eyebrows were furrowed, and he looked like he was in pain. His face was ashen, and there was a faint layer of gold floating above it. His breathing was suddenly intense and suddenly weak, rising and falling as if he was going to die at any time. Chuli shook his head. He did not expect him to become like this. Ever since he became Dong Jinshin's junior brother, Zhou Jie went down the mountain to travel, probably to avoid his master's uncle. He had not seen him for a long time, but he did not expect to see him in such a situation this time. He stepped into the basilica and gave a fist salute. Senior brother? He had just sensed Dong Jinshin calling him, so he came straight back. Dong Jinshin was holding Zhou Jie's wrist and channeling to help him expel the shadow of death. Dong Jinshin looked up at him and said hurriedly, "Junior brother, please save little Jie's life." Chuli sighed. "Did you take the spirit blessing pill?" "Yes, it's useless." Dong Jinshin shook his head and sighed. "The enlightened master's power is destroying the pill's efficacy. Little Jie's life is in danger." Enlightened master. Chuli went forward in surprise and put his hand on Zhou Jie's wrist. He felt a strange power, pure and overbearing, as if it had its own consciousness, constantly devouring the pill's efficacy. It was the enlightened master's power. Logically, under such an enlightened master's power, Zhou Jie's life would have been long gone. After all, his cultivation level was too low, and he could not block an enlightened master's attack at all. Even the weakest enlightened master's palm was enough to kill him. "How is it, can you save him?" Dong Jinshin asked hurriedly. Chuli nodded. He thought about it, and the inner energy of the real supreme titanium scripture drilled in, wrapped around this ball of inner energy, and pulled it back. The real supreme titanium scripture was abnormally overbearing, and once it entered, the destruction to Zhou Jie was even more severe. Zhou Jie trembled violently, and his breath rushed out, as if he was about to take his last breath. Dong Jianxin was so frightened that he hurriedly channeled. Chu Li shook his head, and the inner energy of the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture drilled into Zhou Jie's body, and then reversed yin into yang. Chapter 1821. Zhou Jie slowly woke up. When he opened his eyes and saw Chu Li, his expression changed slightly, and he looked a little embarrassed. "Young Jie, how is it?" Dong Jianxin asked. "Master." Zhou Jie suddenly showed a wronged expression. "Master, I was almost killed this time." "Who did it?" Dong Jianxin said in a low voice. He showed an angry expression and his eyes were like lightning. He could tolerate being wronged because his martial arts was not strong enough. In today's world, the strong were respected. Even if it was a disciple of Goddess Attraction Mountain, if their cultivation level was not high enough, it was inevitable to be wronged. So he had to work hard to improve himself. But he could not tolerate his disciple being wronged. It was worse than being wronged himself. Zhou Jie said, "Leng Shouren." "Leng Shouren?" Dong Jianxin was stunned. "The great Ji Emperor?" He looked at Chu Li. Chu Li nodded thoughtfully. "Seems like it was his inner energy. I don't know why he wanted to kill you. As an enlightened master, he can't simply attack or the heavenly rules will not tolerate it." Dong Jianxin nodded. He knew the rules. An enlightened master was more restricted. Dong Jianxin said, "Did you offend him? Or hurt a disciple of the royal family?" "This." Zhou Jie showed an embarrassed expression and nodded. Dong Jianxin frowned. "Tell me, how did he hurt him?" Zhou Jie glanced at Chu Li. Chu Li smiled. "How about I go back first and not disturb your conversation?" "Junior, don't go." Dong Jianxin scoffed. "If it wasn't for your master's uncle, you would have lost your life. I couldn't have saved you." "Thank you." "Master's uncle." Zhou Jie closed fist saluted. His breathing was already balanced. His strength was gradually returning. His injuries were rapidly recovering. He could clearly feel a strange power rapidly healing his injuries. His body was getting better. As he marveled at Chu Li's power, he felt more and more uncomfortable. He left the mountain to avoid Chu Li. He didn't want to call him master's uncle. He didn't want to be stared at and sized up. In the end, he had to save him. It was really awkward. It was as if he worked hard to escape, but in the end, he still couldn't escape from his palm. Chu Li retracted his hand and waved. "No need to be so polite. Tell me, why did you have a conflict with a disciple of the great Ji Emperor? Did you kill or hurt him?" "Killed," Zhou Jie said helplessly. Dong Jianxin frowned. Injuring someone would be fine, but killing someone would be troublesome, especially if the person was a member of the royal family. The descendants of the royal clan couldn't be killed. This was the common understanding of everyone, and it was also something that the heavenly deities abided by. Because everyone was a heavenly deity, once a descendant of the royal clan was killed, they had no choice but to act. Once a heavenly deity acted, if they weren't careful, they might violate the heavenly rules. Chu Li asked, "Why did you kill them?" "He deserves to die." Zhou Jie snorted and said, "Running amok on the streets, riding a horse and sending several people flying, directly killing them. There were even 2 children. He really deserves to die." Chu Li frowned. "How dare you act so recklessly? No one dared to interfere, but I insisted on interfering. I killed that fellow to serve as a warning to others." Zhou Jie gritted his teeth and snorted. Otherwise, no one in this world would dare to control these lawless descendants of the imperial family. The children of the royal family are indeed a big trouble. Dong Jianxin nodded. The heavenly deities didn't care about the descendants of the other heavenly deities, and those who weren't heavenly deities didn't dare to either. As such, as time flowed on, the descendants of the royal clan grew more and more domineering. No one dared to provoke them, to the point where they were completely unrestrained. Chu Li said, "If that's the case, you were justified in killing him." "Of course. As a disciple of Goddess Attraction Mountain, how can I kill the innocent?" Zhou Jie said proudly. Chu Li nodded slowly and said, "Ling Shoren appeared as soon as you killed the child of the royal family?" "Yes." Zhou Jie nodded hard. "He appeared very quickly. I don't even know if it was a trap." Chu Li smiled. "It's really hard to say. Did you give your name?" Dong Jianxin scoffed with a dark expression. Zhou Jie hurriedly said, "Master, when I saw the heavenly deities, I didn't dare to not give my name. If I was one step late, I would have died, so I quickly gave my name." "Looks like your name is useful, junior brother." Dong Jianxin turned his head and smiled. In a situation like Zhou Jie's, it was reasonable for an enlightened master to kill him. Even if Zhou Jie was a disciple of Goddess Attraction Mountain, Ling Shoren would have killed him in vain. Goddess Attraction Mountain was not in the right. However, it was different now. Goddess Attraction Mountain had Chu Li, forming a strong deterrent. Ling Shoren did not dare to kill him, afraid that Chu Li would come looking for him. Chu Li smiled. "He might not be afraid of me. He might be afraid of Master. If he really killed nephew Zhou, Master might kill him out of anger. You are more famous than Master now." Dong Jianxin smiled. "Young Jie, you have to thank your Master's junior. Otherwise, you would have lost your little life." Zhou Jie smiled awkwardly and nodded. Chu Li said, "I will go find Ling Shoren." "Forget it." Dong Jianxin waved his hand. Chu Li looked at Dong Jianxin in surprise. His senior brother was a protective person and could not tolerate his disciple being bullied. He thought he would not let it go and teach Ling Shoren a lesson. Dong Jianxin sighed. After all, young Jie killed him. Chu Li looked at Zhou Jie. Zhou Jie nodded helplessly. "Master is right. I already killed him, but he did not kill me. There is no reason to go find him." Chu Li smiled. "Senior brother, you can't be thinking of going yourself?" Dong Jianxin smiled. "I would be humiliating myself if I went to find him." "Forget it." Chu Li nodded gently. "I will go and talk to him. He can't beat up our Goddess Attraction Mountain disciple for nothing. Besides, he is not in the right. Junior brother, the higher your status, the more careful you have to be. Don't be arrogant," Dong Jianxin said solemnly. Chu Li nodded. The strong would be arrogant, and arrogance would lead to death. He understood this principle. He returned to his courtyard first. Xiao Qi was dressed in white like snow. Suru stood by the side to serve her. The two women were watching Pang Shiji practice swordsmanship. When Chu Li suddenly appeared, the two women sensed him and turned their heads. He waved his hand to indicate not to disturb Pang Shiji. Pang Shiji's expression was extremely focused. His sword was slow and calm. He looked like a master. Chu Li nodded with satisfaction, then shook his head. Pang Shiji's swordsmanship was not bad, but his understanding of swordsmanship was quite average. It was obvious that he did not grasp the essence. He only followed the situation and did not understand the essence of swordsmanship. Pang Shiji slowly stopped and returned his sword to its scabbard. He closed-fist saluted. "Master." He was now in awe of Chu Li. Even though he was so young, he was willing to call him master. Chu Li nodded. "It seems that your swordsmanship has not been mastered. If it doesn't work, you can practice the knife." "Master, I still prefer swordsmanship." Pang Shiji was a little annoyed. He could hear the contempt in Chu Li's tone and felt it was unbearable. Chu Li shook his head. "You don't have to force yourself to cultivate. If swordsmanship is not suitable, you can cultivate the knife technique. If the knife technique is not suitable, you can change to the palm technique. Everyone's talent is different." Pang Shiji said, "I want to cultivate swordsmanship." Chu Li smiled. Alright, then continue cultivating. It's inevitable that you will suffer more. I want to cultivate swordsmanship, Pang Shurji said in a low voice. Chu Li glanced at Shao Qi with a smile. Shao Qi said, then cultivate swordsmanship. Chu Li smiled. Since Master's wife has spoken, I will cultivate swordsmanship. Pang Shurji closed fist saluted. Thank you, Master's wife. Chapter 1822. Chu Li told her everything that had happened. Shao Qi nodded thoughtfully but did not comment. Su Ru asked, Chu Li, are you going to stand up for Zhou Jie? Chu Li replied, I can't just watch a disciple of Goddess Attraction Mountain being wronged. I have to reason with His Majesty. Reason for what? Su Ru scoffed. He's in the right but you're not. He ran over a pedestrian with his horse, so of course he deserved to die. He deserved to be killed. Chu Li smiled. Chief Su doesn't think he deserved to be killed. He did deserve to die. Su Ru nodded. But since he's already been killed and Ling Shorin didn't kill Zhou Jie, then we're even. No one owes anyone anything. Shao Qi said, You're right. Chu Li smiled. Looks like Madam doesn't agree with me going. You're right, but you still have to go, Shao Qi said. Not only was Chu Li in the wrong in this matter, but the key was also Chu Li's attitude and how much he protected Goddess Attraction Mountain. If Chu Li did not stand up for Goddess Attraction Mountain because he was in the wrong, people would use this to attack Goddess Attraction Mountain and make Chu Li run around for his life. She understood that Su Ru did not want Chu Li to leave because of Zhou Jie. Zhou Jie was a very unpopular fellow. He was unpopular throughout Goddess Attraction Mountain. Moreover, Su Ru also knew that Zhou Jie had made things difficult for Chu Li back then. However, this matter did not only involve Zhou Jie but also Goddess Attraction Mountain and Dong Jianxin. She had to stand up for Zhou Jie. Chu Li said, Then I'll listen to Madam and go see His Majesty. Su Ru rolled her eyes at him and felt wronged. At his current level, there was really no need for him to be so considerate. The world was ruled by the strong, and Chu Li had already become the strongest, so he could do whatever he wanted. Chu Li looked at Pang Shurji. How about this, let's exchange a few moves. Yes. Pang Shurji was eager to try. He also wanted to see his own limit. He felt that after learning this sword technique, his understanding of swordsmanship had improved by leaps and bounds and could not be compared to before. However, he still wanted to know to what extent and how big the gap was between him and his master. Chu Li waved. Pang Shurji shouted, Watch my sword. The sword was already stabbing at Chu Li. Chu Li took a step to the side and pointed his fingers at the void like a sword. Pang Shurji had no choice but to take a step back. Although Chu Li looked like he was unarmed, his movements were as sharp as a sword. His fingers had already pierced Pang Shurji's weak spot, forcing him to change tactics. Pang Shurji's swordsmanship was fragmented, which made him feel strangely frustrated. He wanted to throw his sword away, but he gritted his teeth and continued to attack. He focused on finding Chu Li's flaws. Chu Li did not use his inner energy. He only used his physical strength and swordsmanship to deal with Pang Shurji. Even so, he still pressured Pang Shurji so much that he could not breathe. It's about time, Shao Qi said. Chu Li withdrew his hand and smiled. It's rare for me to be able to withstand so many moves. Let's practice our swordsmanship then. Pang Shurji's understanding of swordplay had not been enlightened, and he needed a period of accumulation. However, he had exceptional tenacity, which was an advantage of being difficult. If he did not have a good understanding of swordplay, and if he did not have good tenacity, he would definitely not be able to master it. His comprehension was not that strong, but he was tenacious enough. With the guidance of a master like Shao Qi or himself, he would be able to make up for it. Perhaps he would be able to achieve something in swordsmanship. Pang Shurji secretly let out a sigh of relief. He attached great importance to Chu Li's judgment. If Chu Li really insisted that he should not cultivate swordsmanship, it would be very difficult for him to persist. He could only give up on swordsmanship, which was equivalent to giving up the chance to become the world's #1 master. Chu Li saw through his thoughts and said, "The world's #1 master is not swordsmanship. Without sufficient cultivation, it's useless no matter how good your swordsmanship is. This path is not easy, you must be prepared." Yes. Pang Shurji nodded firmly. Chu Li suddenly appeared in King An's imperial residence. King An's imperial residence was unusually quiet. Shao Qi and Shao Shi were not here, and only Shao Qi's master was guarding the place. No one dared to act recklessly, not even Ling Shoren dared to trespass. He left the next moment and appeared in the backyard of the imperial house. In the backyard, Ling Shoren was drinking by himself in a gazebo. He looked relaxed and at ease. The surroundings were surrounded by exotic flowers and plants, and their fragrance filled the air. Chu Li took a step forward and sat in front of him. Ling Shoren extended his hand and gestured for him to sit. Chu Li sat down. "Your Majesty, you are so carefree. I have become an enlightened master. I can do whatever I want in the world. Why wouldn't I be carefree?" Ling Shoren chuckled and put down his wine cup. He then poured a cup for Chu Li. "Come, let's have a toast." Chu Li looked at the wine cup. Ling Shoren said, "Does Chief Chu suspect that I will poison you?" Chu Li nodded. "Your Majesty is indeed capable of such means. I am not fortunate enough to enjoy your Majesty's wine." Ling Shoren raised his eyebrows. Chu Li smiled. "Forget it. Let's talk about Zhou Jie. Did he kill an emperor's descendant?" He felt that something was wrong. Ling Shoren was too calm. He was not nervous and excited when he saw Chu Li earlier. He was unusually calm, as if Chu Li was not the world's #1 master, but just an ordinary master. Ling Shoren did not have a good relationship with him. Logically speaking, when he appeared, Ling Shoren should be nervous and worried that Chu Li would help Zhou Jie. He should be on his guard. However, Chu Li was calm and composed, which was unusual. This kind of situation usually meant that he had something to rely on, or nothing mattered. No matter what the situation was, it was not good for him. Chu Li focused the omniscient mirror and observed Ling Shoren's heart. Ling Shoren felt that something was wrong. It was as if an invisible eye was spying on him. He looked at Chu Li in confusion. Chu Li looked at him calmly. He did not find the source, but the feeling had disappeared. He drank another cup of wine and looked relaxed. Chu Li was moved and smiled. "It seems that your Majesty has something to rely on. Did the Lung family send another celestial?" "That's right." Ling Shoren chuckled. "The ancestors of the Ling family did not give up on me and descended to the mortal world. I really don't have to worry too much." Chu Li said, "It can't be like Meng Xiaoqi, right? This time, it's not you who killed the celestial, it's the celestial that wants to kill you." Ling Shoren shook his head and sighed. "Chief Chu, you are also a genius. To be able to achieve what you have today as a scribe, it's a shame that it ends here. Today, you are going to ascend to the heavens. Did you not expect this? Did you think that you should live for thousands of years and not die halfway?" Chu Li smiled. "Your Majesty, do you really have the confidence to kill me?" "What do you think?" Ling Shoren drank another cup of wine and sighed. "If I didn't have the confidence, how would I dare to make a move?" Chu Li could already see from his mind that there was indeed an extremely powerful celestial descending to the mortal world. He was hiding in the dark and preparing to kill him. However, to be safe, he still had to use a plan to kill him. Chu Li frowned. He did not feel the existence of this celestial. This was a big problem. Could it be that a high-ranked celestial could easily descend to the mortal world? A celestial that could hide from him had to be at least of Song Sizu's level. The Changshan denomination had Song Wuji, so they could send a high-ranked celestial. But what about the Ling family? He frowned slightly. Could it be that the Lung family also had someone important in the Outland, so they could send a high-ranked celestial? If that was the case, it would be a little troublesome. Lung Shoren saw that he was silent and chuckled. Chief Chu, is Suan doing well? Of course, everything is fine. Chu Li nodded. Lung Shoren smiled. Chief Chu, do you still want him to succeed the throne? Chapter 1823. The Titanium Temple isn't easy to deal with, but Suan is. Lung Shoren smiled. Suan's weakness is obvious. Anyone can see it. Your Majesty wants to deal with Suan? Chu Li shook his head. I don't think you've experienced the tactics of the Titanium Temple. Even the Lung clan's ancestor won't be able to protect you. It's okay, I won't do it myself. Isn't it better to let Suan commit suicide? Lung Shoren asked. Chu Li frowned. Lung Shoren smiled. If we capture Third Lady Xiao and kill her in front of Suan, or even humiliate her before killing her, what do you think Suan will do, Chief Chu? Chu Li squinted his eyes and a blue light flashed. The Thunder Sword of God was activated. Bang! Lung Shoren was sent flying and landed in the bushes outside the gazebo. He struggled but failed to get up. He laid in the bushes with thorns and thorns all over his body. His yellow robe was torn and his face and hands were covered in blood. He did not look like an enlightened master at all. He looked like a normal person without any martial art. As an enlightened master, he bled from the thorns. It was beyond logic. The power of Chu Li's Thunder Sword of God was shocking. Ever since he isolated himself in the Wheel Pagoda and used the Wheel Pagoda in his body, his spirit became stronger and purer. The power of the Thunder Sword of God was much stronger than before. Chu Li said coldly, I'll spare your life. If you continue to be so despicable, don't blame me for killing you. I'll destroy the Lung clan. You? Lung Shoren stood up with a pale face. His face was dark as if it was made of iron and his eyes were spitting fire. He had a splitting headache, but he endured it with his strong willpower. He did not let himself cry out in pain, but it felt like a knife was slashing at his head. The pain was getting stronger and stronger. Chu Li said, Your Majesty, do you think I can't kill you? Good. Good. Lung Shoren took a deep breath and thought to himself that a little impatience would spoil a great plan. He said in a deep voice, You are indeed the world's #1 expert. He knew that Chu Li's martial arts was tyrannical and he had experienced it before, but he did not expect it to be to this extent. Initially, he was confident that he could kill Chu Li, but now it seemed that he had to be even more careful. Chu Li said calmly, I don't deserve to be called the world's #1 master. Who dares to say that? I don't dare. Chief Chu, you don't have to be so polite. You are recognized as the world's #1. Lung Shoren gritted his teeth and said slowly, It's not a big deal to lose to Chief Chu. Chu Li said, It seems that His Majesty is very confident that he can kill me. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said such a thing. Come at me then, there's no need to hide. As soon as he finished speaking, he struck with his palm. A beam of golden light descended from the sky and condensed into a palm print in front of him before striking out. As the golden light fell, the golden palm flew out at the speed of lightning and was impossible to defend against. Bang! A muffled sound came from the void and a figure appeared. A handsome young man stood in the void looking down at Chu Li. When Chu Li looked at the handsome young man, he vaguely resembled Ling Wufeng but did not look like Lung Shoren. It seemed like Ling Wufeng when he was young. Ancestor. Ling Shoren gave a fist salute respectfully. His face was pale and his aura was weak. In just a short while, he had been tortured to the point that he wished he was dead. He was dispirited and listless. The deeper Chu Li's understanding of the Earth Matrix and reincarnation scripture, the more obvious the changes in his martial arts became. When he performed the scripture, he could freely transform into Yin or Yang force and operate it with Yin force or Yang force. The god-punishing thunder sword could operate with yin and yang force at will. This time it was a yin force. Instead of destroying his soul in one go, it was torturing him bit by bit because it was angry at him for being disrespectful to Shao-Chi. Even if Ling Shoren had the technique to protect his soul, he could not defend against the invisible and soft god-punishing thunder sword. "You may leave." The young man waved his hand and said calmly. "Yes." Ling Shoren took a step back with difficulty. Chu Li knew from Ling Shoren's mind that this person was called Ling Zhifei. He was the second emperor who founded the Ji dynasty and could be considered a wise ruler. Not only was he wise, but he was also gifted. After he was conferred the title of Enlightened Master, he was able to stop the Fu dynasty's attack and help the Ji dynasty gain a foothold. When the Ji dynasty founded the dynasty, it was to snatch food from the Fu dynasty. The land where the Ji dynasty was located was originally the Fu dynasty's territory. It was the ancestors of the Ji dynasty who rebelled against the Fu dynasty and founded the Ji dynasty. It was difficult to conquer the country, but it was even harder to sit on it. After the ancestors of the Ji dynasty conquered the country, Ling Zhifei became the second emperor and stabilized the country. Thus, the Ji dynasty was not destroyed by the Fu dynasty. If it were not for his wisdom, the Ji dynasty would have been destroyed and would not have lasted until today. Chu Li frowned and looked at Ling Zhifei. He was indeed a strong opponent. His rank was extremely high and was likely to be rank 2, which was similar to Song Sizu. Ling Zhifei was also looking at Chu Li. At the same time, he released a spiritual force at Ling Shoren. The spiritual force was invisible, but it could not be seen by others. However, it could not be hidden from Chu Li's eyes. Bang! Chu Li's god-punishing thunder sword stabbed again. The god-punishing thunder sword collided with the invisible spiritual force, and a loud sound was heard. Ling Zhifei frowned and stared at Chu Li with a cold expression. He did not expect Chu Li to be so sharp that he could see his soul tracking palm. The soul tracking palm used the power of the soul. It could kill people without a trace. Of course, it could also save people without a trace. Bystanders could not see or even feel it. However, Chu Li could intercept it, and he did it without making a sound. He was sure that he could kill Chu Li because of the soul tracking palm. However, Chu Li also had this ability. Both of them were evenly matched. He had to be careful not to fail miserably. He was born with a strong soul, so he could cultivate the soul tracking palm. However, the younger generation did not have the same talent and could not cultivate it. The Lung clan's strongest martial art was also lost. This made him especially sad. This time, he wanted to find a descendant of the Lung clan to see if he could pass this antique study down so that the Lung clan could dominate the world. Ah! Ling Shoren finally cried out in pain. Chu Li glanced at him and did not say anything. Ling Shoren suddenly squatted down. His head was drenched in sweat and steam was rising. Ling Zhifei frowned and scoffed. "Get up!" Ling Shoren tried his best to stand up. His face was pale and his eyes were unfocused. The pain was beyond what he could bear. This was not pain that an enlightened master could withstand. The god-punishing thunder sword still contained a trace of the power of thunder. Thunder was the core of all things and the mother of all power. No matter how strong he was, he could not withstand the torture of the god-punishing thunder sword. Ling Zhifei scoffed. "Look at what you've got." He especially could not stand such weak people. His soul was strong, so his will was especially strong. He could withstand any pain. He hated the weakness of his disciples. "Ancestor." Ling Shoren smiled bitterly. He knew Ling Zhifei's temper, but the pain was too intense. He could not bear it. Chu Li said, "If we don't save him, he'll die." "You're exaggerating." Ling Zhifei shook his head. Chu Li smiled and shook his head. "He won't last more than 10 breaths. Heh." Ling Zhifei sneered in disdain. In a flash, he appeared in front of Chu Li. He slammed one palm down and the other toward Ling Shoren. Chu Li took a step back and dodged. The god-punishing thunder sword shot out again and blocked in front of Ling Shoren. Bang! A dull sound was heard. The palm did not hit Ling Shoren. Chapter 1824. Chu Li said, "It's useless, you can't save him." What a vicious heart! Lung Zhifei scoffed. This time, he ignored Ling Shoren and his body expanded into a ray of light that wrapped around Chu Li. Chu Li used the supreme Vajra palm to counter. Bam 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 bam! Chu Li's supreme Vajra palm grew stronger and the golden light from the sky grew brighter. Ling Zhifei's body began to shine brighter too. After 10 palms, Ling Shoren screamed again and fell to the ground. Damn it! Ling Zhifei roared and attacked with more than 10 palms in a frenzy. Chu Li knew that he was pretending to save Ling Shoren, but he did not dare to be careless. He could only deal with them one by one and watched as Ling Shoren was hit by a palm energy. Ling Shoren trembled and seemed to wake up. Chu Li was shocked. Ling Zhifei's soul-tracking palm was amazing and could track souls. Ling Shoren's soul was slowly torn apart by the god-killing thunder sword. The pain was unbearable, but he did not faint. The pain was worse than death. In the end, he could not take it anymore and fainted after exceeding his limit. This meant that he was finally freed. His soul could not withstand the torture and was about to shatter. At this crucial moment, the soul-tracking palm came and saved his soul. It saved Ling Shoren's life. Chu Li thought for a while and decided not to kill him. Ling Shoren was half-crippled now. Even if he recovered, he would be traumatized and would not be able to resist the god-killing thunder sword. He might even become a frightened bird and would not be a threat to Chu Li. If Chu Li decided to kill him, Ling Zhifei would fight with his life. There was no need to fight Ling Zhifei now. He was condensing the rotating wheel tower. If he could master the Earth Matrix and reincarnation scripture, his divine power would improve and he would be able to defeat Ling Zhifei. The thought flashed through his mind and he did not shoot another god-killing thunder sword. Ling Zhifei stood in front of Ling Shoren and stared at Chu Li. Chu Li said, "I'll spare his life this time. If there's a next time, I won't let him go." "How arrogant," Ling Zhifei said. He realized that Chu Li was more difficult to deal with than he had imagined, so he was not in a hurry to fight. It was good enough that he could save Ling Shoren. If he really fought with Chu Li, it would be difficult to predict who would win. He had paid a huge price to enter this realm, so he could not leave so easily. Chu Li said, "Let's have a chat." "What is there to talk about?" Ling Zhifei asked in a deep voice. He heaved a sigh of relief. He could tell that Chu Li did not intend to risk his life. At his current position, there was really no need for him to risk his life. Everything could be solved through negotiation. It would not be too late to make a move if things did not work out. Chu Li said, "It's about the Crown Prince. You want to meddle in the internal affairs of the royal family." Ling Zhifei frowned. He was a strong and domineering monarch, and he could not allow others to encroach on his power. However, he was not blindly fierce and domineering. He knew the way to combine strength and gentleness, so he would not easily get angry or deny it. Chu Li faintly said, "Electing a crown prince is not only an internal affair of the Ling family, but also a major event in the world. As a member of the House of High Dukes, I have to say something." "All right, feel free to speak your mind." Ling Zhifei was stunned. Only then did he remember Chu Li's other identity. He was the prince consort of the House of High Dukes Crown Prince, so he was indeed qualified to participate in this matter. All 12 houses of High Dukes had the authority. Chu Li said, "If I let Suen be the Crown Prince, His Majesty will definitely not agree." Ling Shoren nodded vigorously. Chu Li glanced at him and faintly smiled. "Why don't I take a step back and let King Ping be the Crown Prince? King Ping is the imperial uncle, how can he be the Crown Prince?" Ling Shoren hurriedly said. Of course, he wanted his son, Ling Feng, to be the crown prince. He would not allow an outsider to be the crown prince. Chu Li smiled and looked at Leng Zhifei. I think that compared to Ling Feng, King Ping is more suitable to be the crown prince, or even the future emperor. It's not like you don't know the current situation. An emperor who knows how to use military force is very important. It's an invisible deterrent. Leng Zhifei remained silent. He was persuaded by Chu Li. The chaotic times had arrived, and the current situation needed an emperor who knew how to use military force. He had also examined King Ping. Although he had no great ambition and had been focusing on scenery and pleasure, he had concealed his sharpness. The most important thing for a person who knew how to use military force was to be indifferent to everything. Only then could he be calm and unbiased. He would not make a wrong judgment that would cause damage to the army. King Ping, Leng Shouqian, was also very talented in using military force. He was indeed an excellent emperor who knew how to use military force. Ancestral Master. Leng Shoren saw that Leng Zhifei was tempted and said anxiously, "My imperial brother and I have never been on good terms. Once he becomes the emperor, I'm afraid that Feng Er's life." Ancestral Master, please reconsider. Leng Zhifei said calmly, "Let King Ping make an enlightened master's oath that he will not harm Feng Er's life. As an emperor, the country was the most important thing. He had to put aside his personal feelings and be responsible for his ancestors, not his useless children." More importantly, Chu Li was on good terms with King Ping, and Chu Li was also on good terms with Fa Yuan from the Tempest Temple. If King Ping were to inherit the throne in the future, based on Chu Li's friendship, King Ping and Fa Yuan would not be too bad. His throne would be unusually stable, and the Ji dynasty would have the foundation to prosper. The disharmony between the civil and military forces had always been a chronic problem, and there was hope that it could be solved. He did a thorough investigation on Chu Li, and he was also very clear about Chu Li's friends and enemies. Chu Li was strong not only because of his martial arts, but also because of the friends he had. Although he did not have many friends, all of them were strong. Leng Shoren hurriedly said, "Ancestral Master." Leng Zhifei waved his hand and said, "All right, it's decided. I will make King Ping the crown prince." Chu Li smiled. If King Ping became the emperor, King An's imperial residence and public house could guarantee that there would be no more trouble. His rear was stable, and he could focus on dealing with Azura. If the Ji dynasty always harbored ill intentions towards King An's imperial residence and public house, he would have to be on guard at all times, and it would take too much energy. Leng Zhifei said, "But the crown prince is still the crown prince, not the emperor. The current emperor is still Shoren." Chu Li smiled. "Of course, I shall take my leave then. Goodbye," Leng Zhifei said. After Chu Li suddenly disappeared, Leng Shoren looked at Leng Zhifei helplessly. Leng Zhifei scoffed. "Don't think about going against him. It's not worth it. Think about how to win him over. If you want the Ji dynasty to become stronger, what you need is not to suppress those who are stronger than you, but to make use of them. If you can make use of all the talents in the world, why would the Ji dynasty need to worry about not being able to prosper? Can't we replace the Fu dynasty?" "Yes, Ancestral Master." Leng Shoren nodded respectfully. He was not worried that he would not be noticed by Leng Zhifei because the position of an enlightened master was conferred by the Grand Master. Even if the Ancestral Master was a celestial, he could not change it. He was only worried that he would be blamed when he reached the Grand Master. However, he had never thought about replacing the Fu dynasty. The Fu dynasty was too powerful. Not only did they have the Tang family, but they also had Goddess Attraction Mountain. Now that the Tang family was not powerful, there was still Goddess Attraction Mountain. Now that Chu Li was in charge of Goddess Attraction Mountain, it was even more difficult to shake it. Leng Zhifei saw through his thoughts and shook his head. A hero who had no ambition and acted despite knowing that it was difficult was the way to do so. How could the Ji dynasty become stronger if he retreated when faced with difficulties? Unfortunately, although he was the ancestral master, he could not change the emperor. He could only rely on King Ping. Fairy attraction Mountain Pang Shurji, dressed in white, came out of Shao Qi's courtyard and gently closed the door. Then, he turned around and walked slowly, thinking about the sword technique he had learned earlier. Chapter 1825. Senior Brother Zhou. Pang Shurji cupped his fists and bowed. Zhou Jie wore a green robe. His face was ruddy, showing no signs of injury from 2 days ago. He stared coldly at Pang Shurji. Pang Shurji cupped his fists and smiled. Senior Brother Zhou, are you feeling better? I've recovered, Zhou Jie said coldly. I'm sorry to disappoint you, Junior Brother Pang. Pang Shurji shook his head. Senior Brother Zhou, what do you mean? I'm very happy to hear that you've recovered. I'm impressed by your intelligence and martial arts to be able to escape from an enlightened master. Zhou Jie's face darkened. Are you mocking me for using Goddess Attraction Mountain's name to save my life? I wouldn't dare. Pang Shurji shook his head and smiled. If I were in your shoes, I would have done the same. Goddess Attraction Mountain can protect us, and we can protect Goddess Attraction Mountain in the future. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Then I really have to thank you. Zhou Jie smiled coldly. Pang Shurji said, Senior Brother Zhou, why are you looking for me? I heard you're very talented and have a high chance of inheriting the position of Mountain Master, Zhou Jie said coldly. Pang Shurji was startled. That was just what he thought. He didn't dare to be so arrogant. It seemed like the position of Goddess Attraction Mountain's Mountain Master was not his turn yet. No matter what, this senior brother was ahead of him. Just like Master and Martial Uncle Dong Jianxin, both of them humbly gave way to each other. Master was unwilling to take the position of Mountain Chieftain, and Martial Uncle was also not keen on it. He and Senior Martial Brother Zhou were far from being Master and Martial Uncle, and he wanted to take the position of Mountain Chieftain. Only by inheriting the position could he live up to his grandfather's sacrifice. Zhou Jie scoffed. Let me tell you, when it comes to Mountain Master, it's not your turn yet, even if you're Martial Uncle's disciple. Pang Shurji shook his head. Senior brother, you misunderstand. I have no such intentions. If he admitted it now, it would be unwise. He was low-key but had great ambitions. Such people were the most unlikable. You can't hide it from me. Zhou Jie smiled. You can't hide it from Martial Uncle either. Yes. Pang Shurji smiled. He knew that he couldn't hide it from his master. His master didn't say much, but with just a glance, he could feel that he was completely seen through by his master. His master just didn't point it out. Zhou Jie said, Since you're talented and you've been Martial Uncle's disciple for a while, let's spar. Please give me some pointers, senior brother. Pang Shurji said. When he fought with his master, his sword art was broken into pieces. He didn't know what would happen if he fought with him, so he wanted to try. Zhou Jie pointed at the vigorous and green pine forest. Let's go in. The two of them entered an empty space within the pine forest. This was obviously a martial arts field, and Pang Shurji had come here to train. Zhou Jie reached out and took an ironwood sword from the weapon rack. Pang Shurji also took an ironwood sword. Although the ironwood sword was made of wood, apart from the fact that it did not have a sharpened edge, its weight and feel were no different from the Qingfeng sword. Moreover, although one would not be seriously injured after taking a hit, minor injuries were inevitable. However, within the Immortal Attraction Mountain, as long as one's life was not in danger, they could always be healed. The spiritual qi here was rich, and injuries healed very quickly. Please. Pang Shurji made a gesture. Zhou Jie's green robe fluttered in the wind. His expression was solemn. The moment he held his sword, his mind became clear. It was as if he had become another person. His calm eyes stared deeply at Pang Shiji. "Junior brother, be careful." He thrust his sword forward and took a step forward. It was as if he drew an arc in the air as he approached Pang Shiji. The tip of his sword was unpredictable. Pang Shiji ignored his sword and lightly thrust forward according to the one form of godly sword that he had learned earlier. Clang! The two swords clashed, and both of them took a step back. Zhou Jie was surprised. He did not expect Pang Shiji's sword art to be so good and his inner energy to be so profound. Initially, he thought that even if his sword art was not as good as Pang Shiji's, his inner energy would be far superior. He thought that he would be able to defeat Pang Shiji with brute force. He took a deep breath and became more attentive. Suddenly, he swung his sword and created a continuous stream of sword shadows, using speed to defeat speed. Pang Shiji tried his best to perform the three forms of godly sword. He had only learned the first form, so he repeatedly used this form. However, this form had too many variations. He had sparred with Xiao Qi many times, so it was almost endless. He was not proficient in it, so he could not have endless variations. He could only perform 36 moves. Clang, 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 clang. In the continuous muffled sounds, it was hard to tell who would win. Zhou Jie was furious and decided to use his sword art to win. So, he suddenly changed his sword art and used slow speed to fight fast speed. He slowly swung his sword, and the tip of the sword trembled as it covered several acupuncture points in front of Pang Shiji, ready to deal a fatal blow at any time. Pang Shiji wanted to attack first, but he could not avoid Zhou Jie. He still had too few variations, so he could not recognize them. Zhou Jie had already seen 36 moves and remembered them. When he used them again, Zhou Jie could recognize them, so he took the opportunity to stab Pang Shiji's wrist. Clang! The ironwood sword flew out and fell to the ground. Pang Shiji felt like his right wrist was about to break. It was extremely painful, but he endured it and calmly gave a fist salute. "Thank you for teaching me, senior brother." Zhou Jie stretched out his sword and picked up the ironwood sword from the ground. He threw it at Pang Shiji. Again, Pang Shiji endured the pain with his right hand and took the sword. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. "I'm not your opponent." Zhou Jie scoffed. "It doesn't matter if you lose. Keep fighting. There will come a day when you win. You have a good comprehension. Actual combat is the best way to practice swordsmanship. Let's spar every day and improve together." "Thank you, senior brother." Even though Pang Shiji knew that he did not have good intentions and wanted to teach him a lesson openly, he could not refuse. If he refused, Master's wife would definitely think that he was a coward. Zhou Jie looked at his wrist. "Your hand is fine, right?" Pang Shiji forced a smile. "It's fine." "That's good. I can't afford to delay my swordsmanship practice," Zhou Jie said. He threw the ironwood sword on the weapon rack and walked away. Pang Shiji looked at his back and gritted his teeth. He looked down at his red and swollen wrist. Even though he had already channeled his energy to heal it, his wrist was still red and swollen. It was obvious that Zhou Jie did it on purpose. It was because of his inner energy. Otherwise, with his inner energy as a grandmaster, he would have healed it a long time ago. It seemed that he had to work hard to practice his swordsmanship. If he was defeated every day, it would be hard for him to persevere. The next morning, when he arrived at Xiao Qi's courtyard, he was stunned to see her in a loose robe. It was not her usual attire. "Master's wife?" He approached her in confusion and gave her a fist salute. Xiao Qi sat in the pagoda and pointed to the opposite side. Pang Shiji sat opposite her and looked at her beautiful face curiously. Every time he saw her, he would sigh at his master's good fortune. "You fought with Zhou Jie?" Xiao Qi asked plainly. Su Ru was dressed in an apricot gown. She stood at the side and smiled. You were defeated. Pang Shurji nodded embarrassedly. Miss Su is right. I can't defeat senior brother Zhou. Zhou Jie is extremely talented. Otherwise, he wouldn't have entered Goddess Attraction Mountain. You don't have to be too discouraged, Shaoqi said plainly. Don't worry, Master's wife. I'm not discouraged, Pang Shurji quickly said. Shaoqi took out a jade pendant from her sleeve and said, This is what your master left for you. He said that he would give it to you when you are really discouraged. It seems that you don't need it anymore. What did my master leave behind? Pang Shurji asked. Chapter 1826. Pang Shurji had a complicated look on his face. Ever since he became Chu Li's disciple, Chu Li had never taught him. Only Master's wife, Shaoqi, had taught him. Chu Li dissected the sword techniques one by one and patiently explained them to him. She was extremely patient and attentive. Shaoqi's beauty was unparalleled. Although she was cold, she never showed an impatient look because he was not enlightened. She still taught him as usual, which made him admire Shaoqi. He felt that his master was not worthy of his master's wife. He grew up without a mother and only lived with his grandfather. He felt the gentleness of a woman from Shaoqi and was extremely grateful to her. Compared to master's wife, he was not a good master. He abandoned his disciple and disappeared all day long. It was fine if he neglected him, but he neglected master's wife. He should not have done that. He never thought that Chu Li would leave such a jade pendant for him. Shaoqi's bright eyes scanned Chu Li's face before she said, Although your master is busy, he's still concerned about your cultivation progress. He knows that you've yet to understand the sword technique, so he spent a lot of effort to make this. I hope you'll treasure it. Yes, thank you, master, Pang Shurji said. Shaoqi said, The way to use this jade pendant is to drip blood on it and stick it between your eyebrows. You will naturally be enlightened. Yes. Pang Shurji could not wait to go back and see what master left behind. Shaoqi said, Try it now. Here? Pang Shurji looked around. Shaoqi smiled. He specifically told me to watch from the side to prevent you from being in danger. All right. Pang Shurji nodded slowly. Master really thought of everything. Every arrangement showed that he cared about him. He felt complicated and did not know how to face it. He took a deep breath to get rid of distracting thoughts. Then, he bit his index finger and dripped 2 drops of blood on the jade pendant. He then watched as the jade pendant began to change. It was originally simple but gradually became clear as if impurities had been removed. Then, it slowly glowed. Amidst the clear light, he slowly pasted it to the center of his eyebrows. His skin felt cool and refreshing, and his mind immediately became clear. Then, his vision turned dark, and with a loud rumble, he suddenly appeared in a vast void. It was like the sky at dawn with a faint blue hue. One could vaguely make out the silhouettes of people, but everything seemed a little surreal. He did not know where he was, but he could clearly see the figure standing in the void. It was his master, Chu Li. Chu Li stepped on the void as if he was standing on flat ground, quietly sizing him up. With a wave of Chu Li's hand, Pang Shurji felt himself floating. It was as if his body had become weightless. He floated over to Chu Li and stood firmly on the spot. His feet were in the air, but there was an invisible force supporting him. He knew that this was Master Chu Li's power. The sword is an extension of the hand. Chu Li's voice was clear and intense. Every single word was clearly imprinted in his mind and would never be forgotten. Using a sword is equivalent to using your hands. As soon as these words entered his mind, Pang Shurji suddenly felt that he was suddenly enlightened. His understanding of swordsmanship had reached a new level. It was as if all swordsmanship had become easy and free. Because he used to practice palm techniques, his hands were very agile. However, ever since he started practicing swordsmanship, he had always been stumbling. No matter how he practiced, he felt awkward. Moreover, he had a tough personality. The more awkward he felt, the more he forced himself to cultivate. Although he had spent a lot of energy, his progress was very little. He was extremely dissatisfied with himself. As soon as Chu Li said this, he suddenly realized that he had made a mistake in swordsmanship. He did not completely turn the sword into a part of himself. The hand and the sword should be one. The hand was the sword, and the sword was the hand. In terms of the subtlety of palm techniques, all 5 fingers had their uses. The subtlety of swordsmanship was not inferior to palm technique. The tip of the sword was like the tip of the finger, and it could also have its own uses. In this way, the swordsmanship and palm techniques were merged into one. Suddenly, he was eager to jump out of this place. He wanted to regain his senses and try to practice the swordsmanship that he had not been able to understand before. Chu Li stared at him and said, "There is no other way in the path of swordsmanship. The only way is to be familiar with it. Only when the sword and the heart are one, and the heart and the sword are one. If the sword and the heart are not one, no matter how exquisite the swordsmanship is, it will only have the form but not the spirit. Its power will be limited. However, the way of the sword and the heart is in visualization. You want your sword to be one with your body. You are the sword, and the sword is you." As soon as he finished speaking, a sword suddenly appeared in the void. Pang Shurji suddenly felt that it was familiar because it was his own sword. The sword flashed and instantly pierced between his eyebrows. He did not even have time to dodge it. His vision darkened for a moment before returning to normal. However, he realized that he had woken up and Shao Qi was staring at him. "Master's wife." Pang Shurji gave a fist salute. Shao Qi asked, "How is it?" Pang Shurji looked confused. He realized that he had taken off the jade pendant and held it tightly in his palm. It was as if the scene he saw just now was just an illusion and never happened. He reached out to touch the hilt of the sword, but he suddenly felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. It was as if the hilt was a part of his body. The feeling of being able to control it spontaneously arose. He could not help but pull out the sword and waved it twice. Shao Qi looked at him quietly and did not ask any more questions. Pang Shurji got up and leaped to the pagoda. He waved his long sword and practiced the swordsmanship that he had learned before. From jerky, he became skilled, and then he became smooth and soft. It was a world of difference compared to what he had practiced before. It was as if he was a different person. Shao Qi nodded lightly. It was indeed effective. She thought it was futile. Pang Shurji put away his sword and excitedly leaped back to the pagoda. He sat in front of Shao Qi. "Master's wife, you're really amazing." Shao Qi smiled faintly. "It's good that it's effective. Are you confident that you can defeat Zhou Jie?" "With Master's guidance and Master's wife's teachings, I'll definitely surpass Senior Zhou." Pang Shurji nodded vigorously. He felt that he had been enlightened. The swordsmanship did not seem difficult to understand anymore. It was not that difficult to cultivate either. If he learned the swordsmanship in this state, his progress would be tremendous. He would definitely surpass Senior Zhou Jie. He had a reason to surpass Senior Zhou Jie, because he wanted to obtain the position of the leader of Goddess Attraction Mountain. "It's good that you're confident." Shao Qi nodded lightly. Suru poured cold water on him. "It's not enough to just have confidence. You also need to practice hard. As far as I know, although Zhou Jie has a bad temper and a bad personality, he's really hard-working in his cultivation. He's more hard-working than anyone in Goddess Attraction Mountain. Aunt Su, don't worry. I'll work harder." Pang Shurji hurriedly said. Suru shook her head. "I just want to say goodbye. Zhou Jie won't be defeated so easily. You're still far from being his opponent. Even if your swordsmanship improves greatly, you won't be able to defeat him in one go. You must be prepared to be suppressed for a long time." "Yes." Pang Shurji slowly nodded. He was a little unconvinced. It seemed like Zhou Jie was not that strong. He felt that their cultivation levels were not that far apart. It was just that his swordsmanship was a little more exquisite. In the following days, he completely believed what Suru said. Zhou Jie had actually hidden his cultivation level. Every time he felt that he was about to defeat him, Zhou Jie would show a little stronger and defeat him. No matter how strong he was, Zhou Jie would become even stronger. Chapter 1827. Pang Shurji's aptitude was outstanding, but Zhou Jie's aptitude was not inferior to his. To be able to become a disciple of Goddess Attraction Mountain meant that his aptitude was the best in the Fu dynasty, and almost no one could compare to him. If Pang Shurji had not had a fortuitous encounter, it would have been impossible for him to surpass Zhou Jie. On the other hand, once Zhou Jie calmed down and no longer harbored any hostility toward Chu Li, he calmed down and cultivated diligently. His progress was astonishing. Compared to Pang Shurji, Zhou Jie had a greater advantage. He had already learned the heart technique of Goddess Attraction Mountain, whereas Pang Shurji's heart technique was still the Great One Palace heart technique, which was far inferior to Goddess Attraction Mountain. The two of them battled with each other, competing with each other, putting their lives on the line to cultivate, and both of them advanced by leaps and bounds. However, Pang Shurji was always suppressed, unable to turn the tables. Fortunately, he had a tough personality, and even though he fell behind, he was not discouraged, and continued to challenge relentlessly. When Xiao Qi saw this, she began to feel anxious for him. However, Chu Li remained calm as if he did not know about it. He would occasionally come back, but he did not bother about it anymore. He only told Pang Shurji and Zhou Jie not to get serious because Goddess Attraction Mountain would not tolerate internal strife among its disciples. In the backyard of King Ping's imperial residence, the night was hazy. Chu Li and King Ping were sitting in a gazebo. At night, the fragrance of flowers assailed their nostrils. The two of them chatted as they sipped their drink. King Ping shook his head and sighed. What a joke! How dare they make me the crown prince? What the hell is this? Isn't that a good thing? Chu Li smiled. King Ping said, How is this considered a good thing? I don't want to be the emperor. Chu Li smiled. Your Royal Highness, things are different now. You don't have to worry about Suan. He's cultivating hard in the temple, and has no time to be distracted. It seems like he doesn't want to get his hands on the throne. Aren't you going to be the emperor? King Ping frowned. Why did you change your mind? Back then, Chu Li had put in a lot of effort in order for Suan to inherit the throne. He had avenged himself and fought for support. He had also made various arrangements. It was truly unbelievable that he had suddenly changed his mind. Now that the world is in chaos, he has great ambitions and wants to relieve the suffering of the people, Chu Li said. King Ping said, Only when you become an emperor can you relieve the suffering of the masses. Chu Li shook his head. I said the same thing, but he said that he wanted to recite Buddhist teachings to relieve the suffering of all living beings. In that case, King Ping shook his head and said, No, let him be the crown prince. I'm not pretending to be polite to you. I really don't want to be the crown prince, nor do I want to be the emperor. I'm tired of fighting and killing. I still want to live a peaceful life. Your Royal Highness has fallen into the land of gentleness. Chu Li shook his head and smiled. What's the point of fighting and killing? King Ping scoffed. You're just a puppet controlled by a grandmaster. You might as well be a carefree Royal Highness like me. Chu Li could not help but laugh. Your Royal Highness, it's better for you to be the crown prince. Otherwise, your ancestors won't agree to it. Sigh. King Ping looked helpless. He couldn't do anything to Leng Zhifei. The second-generation ancestor was wise and powerful, and he deeply worshipped him. He had always worshipped this ancestor since he was young, but he didn't expect to meet him here. He thought he would be at the sky beyond heaven. However, after meeting him, He realized that the ancestor was not as beautiful as he thought. He was overbearing and could not be disobeyed. He couldn't say no to him at all, and he could only obey his orders. Otherwise, he would definitely be reprimanded. He originally rejected the position of crown prince, but Leng Zhifei personally came forward and forced him to accept it. Otherwise, he wouldn't be the crown prince. Chu Li said, "Your Royal Highness, just be at ease and be the crown prince. Just let me know if you need anything." "I'll have to trouble you in the future," King Ping said. Chu Li nodded, gave a fist salute and disappeared. He appeared next to the ice pool in the 100,000 Hills. The azure dragon and the vitality-devouring turtle were asleep at the bottom of the pool. Chu Li smiled. This deep sleep was like hibernation, but it was an opportunity for them to greatly increase their strength. When they woke up, their strength would greatly increase, and they might even have a breakthrough. However, this sleep might take years or even decades. They had extremely long lifespans, and the time they slept was also exceptionally long, far beyond what humans could compare. A red shadow flashed, and the tiny vermilion bird appeared in front of him. It landed on his shoulder, and its voice appeared in his mind. "Help!" Chu Li immediately understood its thoughts. He suddenly appeared in a mangrove forest, and saw the vermilion bird he saw last time. It was lying motionless in a nest woven from redwood branches, and it was barely breathing. Chu Li shook his head helplessly and reached out to touch its wings. Suddenly, a pure energy was injected into it. The energy he injected was the inner energy of the vermilion bird power. The vermilion bird power was compatible with the other three heart techniques, but he could still use the vermilion bird power. Moreover, because he was an enlightened master, his energy was purer and more effective. After the vermilion bird power was injected, the dying vermilion bird slowly regained its spirit, and it began to fight against the cold force in its body. Chu Li shook his head, and activated the black tortoise power to absorb the cold force. He suddenly realized that his energy was purer, and he could upgrade the azure dragon and the vitality-devouring turtle's ranks. He might even be able to upgrade the rank of the level 2 spirit beasts to rank 1, and then he would be able to protect himself in the 100,000 Hills. Once he entered rank 1, as long as he did not offend the low spirit beasts, it would not be difficult to stay alive. However, this vermilion bird had repeatedly provoked the black tortoise, so it was a different story. Chu Li flashed and returned to the side of the ice pool. The little vermilion bird flew over and landed on the ice in front of him. It tilted its head and looked at Chu Li. "Tell me, what do you want in return?" Chu Li said, 10 stalks of Ming grass." Ming grass. The little vermilion bird nodded lightly, leaped into the air, and disappeared in a flash. At this time, in the fairies' capital, the imperial residence of King Ping was filled with muffled sounds. Leng Zhifei, Leng Shouren, King Ping, and Consort Ping were surrounded by 8 celestial beings, and they were in a precarious situation. These celestial beings were all very skilled. 2 of them were on par with Leng Zhifei, and although the other 6 were slightly weaker, they were more than enough to deal with King Ping and Consort Ping. The couple could not breathe under the pressure. King Ping's martial arts was not very strong, and Consort Ping, Mu Yulan, was much more powerful than him. It was all because of her protection that King Ping could hold on until now. "Consort, don't worry about me. Let's break out of the encirclement first," King Ping said. Mu Yulan shook her head without saying a word. There was a shadow of the Empyrean fairy in the void above her head, absorbing the spiritual energy around her and transforming it into inner energy of the Empyrean fairy power. Her body was like a phantom surrounding King Ping, resisting the siege of the 6 celestial beings. Although it was a precarious situation, she could still hold on. The shadow above her head suddenly let out a long howl, as if it was a silent cry. The surrounding celestial beings did not notice anything strange, and did not mind it as they continued to attack fiercely. Leng Zhifei shouted, "Who are you? Why are you trying to kill the Ji dynasty's crown prince? The 8 celestial beings did not say a word, and only attacked fiercely. His opponent was an old man with white eyebrows and a beard. His cultivation level was similar to his, but he was experienced and ruthless. Even though Ling Zhifei had a strong will and a profound cultivation level, he could not suppress him, and could not help King Ping. Ling Shoren's opponent was a middle-aged man. His body was glowing, and his aura was vigorous. Ling Shoren said, "Crown Prince, you're close to Chuli, right? Ask him to come and help." King Ping said, "How can we trouble Chuli with this kind of thing? What time is it? What's there to be so particular about?" Ling Shoren said impatiently. King Ping shook his head and said nothing. He did not want to trouble Chuli. He already owed Chuli his life, but he did not keep his promise. Instead, he became the crown prince. He really did not have the face to ask Chuli for help. If he died, then so be it. He had lived long enough anyway. As long as he died, the consort would not have to be burdened anymore, and she would be able to escape easily. His ancestors and Ling Shoren would not be a problem. Chapter 1828. Since the death of the original princess, he had always wanted to die. Even when he met Mu Yulan and fell in love with her at first sight due to her beauty and temperament, it did not dispel his desire to die. He had always felt guilty towards the princess, and this guilt did not diminish as time went by. Instead, it grew stronger and stronger. Whenever he woke up in the middle of the night, he would cry and recall the past. The scenes of him and the princess seemed to be right in front of his eyes. He could not free himself from it and wanted to commit suicide to follow the princess. Unfortunately, he could not make up his mind because he was a grandmaster while the princess was not a grandmaster. She was just an ordinary person and would probably enter the reincarnation cycle after death. However, she had the identity of the princess, so she could enter the grandmaster's boundary. He hated himself for being useless and not being able to save the princess from death. Secondly, he hated himself for being heartless and did not treat the princess well when she was alive. He clearly liked her but pretended to be indifferent and hurt the princess. Now that he thought about it, he was so stupid, but he had no chance to make up for it. The better Mu Yulan treated him, the more guilty he felt. He felt that he had killed too many people and was an unlucky person. He was afraid that he would be implicated if he stayed by her side. This time was an example. Instead of that, he might as well go back and find the princess. Mu Yulan knew his mind very well. Usually, she could only use gentleness to resolve the obstacles in his heart, but this time, she did not force him and called Lu Yurong. As long as Lu Yurong came, Chuli could come. As soon as she thought of this, Lu Yurong appeared in a snow-white dress and came to Mu Yulan. She said in surprise, "Senior Sister Mu." As she spoke, her bright eyes scanned the situation. She only nodded at Ling Shoren and then ignored him. She struck out 2 Empyrean fairy palms with her palms, and Mu Yulan followed suit. The 4 palms merged into one, and the strength of the 2 was not stacked but increased by a few times. Bang! A celestial man flew out and spat blood in the air. Then, his body suddenly lit up and rose into the sky. The Empyrean fairy palm that the 2 women used together was extremely powerful. Mu Yulan was refreshed and smiled. "Yurong, you're here." Lu Yurong said, "What's going on?" The 2 of them joined their hands together with great power and completely protected King Ping. The other 5 celestial beings were no longer a threat and were at a disadvantage under the joint attack of the 2 women. Lu Yurong's cultivation on Goddess Attraction Mountain improved by leaps and bounds. With Shao Qi, who cultivated the regal sword scripture, by her side, the 2 of them constantly exchanged pointers and secretly competed with each other. In a competitive environment, their cultivation speed increased. Moreover, she had obtained the complete inheritance of the Empyrean fairy technique. This technique was extremely profound and powerful. It was originally an absolute art from the sky beyond heaven, and even though her cultivation was not as good as an enlightened deity's, she already possessed some of the enlightened deity's abilities. She could break through space and stand in the void. When Ling Zhifei and Ling Shoren saw this, they calmed down and focused on the opponents in front of them. Gradually, they regained their advantage. Ling Shoren opened his mouth, but there was nothing he could say. Originally, they were very close to each other, but now they were like strangers. Everything was because of him, and he regretted it. Unfortunately, he was a king, and could not turn around and curry favor with a subject. Even if the subject was his most important confidant, he could only make the best of his mistakes and come to this point. There were only 7 of the 8 celestials left, and they looked at each other when they saw this. Suddenly, their bodies shone brightly, so bright that one could not look directly at them. Their cultivation levels skyrocketed. Humph! Lu Yurong scoffed. Who are these sneaky people? Mu Yulan said, I only know that they want to kill your Royal Highness. I hate sneaky assassins the most. Lu Yurong scoffed. The color of blood gradually faded from their faces, and they became like pure white jade. They were glistening with clear light, and their power increased greatly. They also used the secret technique of the Empyrean Fairy technique to block the storm-like attacks of the Celestials. Bang! Suddenly, there was a muffled sound, and one of the Celestials exploded. From the explosion, a bright light shot straight into the sky. Lu Yurong flew backward. She did not expect the Celestial in front of her to self-destruct without warning, and the power was so strong. King Ping said in a low voice, Miss Lu. Lu Yurong waved her hand in the air, and then she spat out an arrow of blood. Bang 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 bang! A series of explosions sounded one after another, and rays of light shot into the sky. Mu Yulan was hit by several explosions, and she flew backward, spitting out a few mouthfuls of blood. She was already unconscious when she flew backward. King Ping was not spared either. He flew backward while spitting out blood, and shot toward Ling Shoren. Ling Shoren helplessly took a step to his side, caught him in the air, and immediately sealed several of his acupuncture points. Ling Shoren's opponent did not chase after him, but pounced toward Mu Yulan. Seeing this, Lu Yurong could only force herself to stand in front of Mu Yulan, and met the middle-aged man's palm. Bang! She spat out another mouthful of blood, and flew backward, almost crashing into Mu Yulan. She turned her body and held Mu Yulan, and her inner energy was already flowing into Mu Yulan. Both of their inner energies came from the same source, and they did not repel each other, which helped her heal with twice the results with half the effort. The middle-aged celestial did not let up, and once again, he hit her with his palm, and his body suddenly lit up. Bang! With a muffled sound, the middle-aged man also exploded, and turned into a ray of light that shot into the sky. Lu Yurong's expression changed. She and Mu Yulan could not avoid this attack, and it was too late to shift through the void. Just as she was about to shift by force, there was a flash in front of her, and Chu Li appeared in front of her. Chu Li took a step back and shook his head. The power of the Celestial's explosion was indeed shocking, but his supreme indestructible body of Vajra was even more amazing. It actually blocked it, and his white robe did not even wrinkle. Why are you here? Lu Yurong smiled like a flower. She felt the elusive ninth heaven fairy's call for help, and directly shifted from the void of Goddess Attraction Mountain to here, but Chu Li was not at Goddess Attraction Mountain at all, so she did not expect him to appear. Chu Li smiled and shook his head, and looked at the Celestial who was fighting with Ling Zhifei and sighed, the Jing dynasty's Celestial? Man proposes, God disposes. The old man with white eyebrows and beard shook his head. They had already calculated everything, including all the martial arts masters in Fairy's capital, and were originally very confident, but they did not expect Lu Yurong and Chu Li to appear. They originally thought that Chu Li did not have a good relationship with the Lung family, and would not interfere. Chu Li scoffed coldly, sinister intentions. The Zheng dynasty's celestial came to assassinate King Ping, obviously because King Ping knew how to use troops, and their intentions were obvious. The old man smiled and suddenly disappeared in a flash. Chu Li's god-slaying thunder sword had already been activated. Bang! The old man swayed and staggered a step, looking at Chu Li in surprise. Chu Li said lightly, "Since you're here, do you still want to leave?" "Good. Good." The old man already knew that he could not escape, and it was impossible to step into the void. Chu Li's method was similar to a soul attack. He could not withstand more than a few hits, and in the end, he would still die, and his soul would be scattered. He made up his mind, and fiercely pounced on Ling Shoren and King Ping. Bang! The old man exploded, and turned into a ray of light that shot into the sky. Chu Li appeared in front of Ling Shoren and King Ping, and blocked the attack. He took 2 steps back, and his face quickly turned pale. He could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood and smiled bitterly. "This guy is so strong." "Chu Li," Lu Yurong hurriedly said. Chu Li waved his hand and smiled, wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth. "Don't worry." He looked at Ling Zhifei with a faint smile. Chapter 1829. As soon as he met Chu Li's gaze, Ling Zhifei froze. His initial urge to act stopped. He knew that Chu Li was pretending to be weak on purpose. If he fell for it and thought that it was a good opportunity to hit him when he was down, then it would be terrible. The consequences would be unpredictable, and it would also give the younger generation an ungrateful image. As an emperor, he had to step on all restraints. Morality and emotions must be cast aside. There was only profit and profit. A true emperor would not care about family. However, he had to conceal his true feelings, otherwise, he would be deserted by his friends and family. Chu Li smiled and looked at him. "Senior Ling, do you know where these people came from?" "The Zheng dynasty's celestial beings." Ling Zhifei took a deep breath and said coldly, "They want to assassinate King Ping. King Ping knows his soldiers. It's obvious why they want to kill King Ping." "Sigh." Ling Shoren said, "Are they going to attack us?" "We'll definitely have to use troops." Ling Zhifei nodded slowly. "Otherwise, they can just assassinate me or you." "Attack." Ling Shoren's expression changed. Ling Zhifei glanced at him. "Why are you afraid of using troops? A war between 2 countries is inevitable. As an emperor, you should treat it as a good opportunity to build your career and expand your territory. How can you be afraid?" "Great ancestor, it's not that I'm afraid, it's that we have no chance of winning." Ling Shoren shook his head and smiled bitterly. The Zheng dynasty has been developing in silence. Although there have been some conflicts with the Qiu dynasty, they haven't fought. No matter how the Fu dynasty instigated it, it was useless. It seems like the Zheng dynasty's emperor is a powerful figure. Ling Zhifei nodded. He now understood the situation after his death. The Fu dynasty was the sole power. They used the art of balance to control the 4 countries. They had been manipulating them to fight endlessly and weaken their strength so that they could not pose a threat to him and could not unite. The Zheng dynasty is full of mysteries. Ling Shoren said, "It's very scary. It's better not to fight." Moreover, Chu Li has just killed Tang Su and the Fu dynasty's emperor has just ascended the throne. He should be at his weakest. You want to go against the Fu dynasty? Ling Zhifei frowned. Ling Shoren nodded. "This is the best chance." Ling Zhifei looked at Chu Li and said, "What about Goddess Attraction Mountain? Can you deal with Immortal Attraction Mountain?" "I don't think Chu Li will intervene in this matter, right?" Ling Shoren asked. Chu Li smiled faintly. "I'm a disciple of Goddess Attraction Mountain. I can't disobey my master's orders. I'm afraid I'll have to offend him when the time comes. The world is in chaos, so your majesty should calm down. It's not that easy to take chestnuts out of the fire. If that's the case, then we can only give up. Ling Shoren glared at Chu Li in dissatisfaction. Chu Li said, "It's best not to get into a fight." Ling Zhifei said faintly, "The Fu dynasty isn't that easy to deal with. You should just give up." "Yes." Ling Shoren nodded helplessly. Chu Li said, "It's better to stay still and not move. It's better for His Majesty to give up on the idea of sending troops elsewhere." Ling Shoren remained silent. Chu Li shook his head and looked at Ling Zhifei. "The ones who came to assassinate your Royal Highness are the Jing dynasty's celestial beings. Senior Ling should know what the celestial beings are thinking. They have ulterior motives. I wonder if Senior is on the celestial being's side or the Ji dynasty's side." "Of course it's the Ji dynasty," Ling Zhifei said in a low voice. "Everything is for the Ji dynasty." Chu Li said with a faint smile, "I don't think so." "What are you trying to say?" Ling Zhifei frowned and looked at him. "If you say that I have ulterior motives and want more people to die, then it's too ridiculous. It's better not to say it out loud and make people laugh." Chu Li said, "It's not appropriate for the Ji dynasty and the Jing dynasty to send troops now." Ling Zhifei scoffed. "If that's the case, you're not going to help?" "Yes." Chu Li nodded. Ling Zhifei sighed and shook his head. "If that's the case, I'll take my leave first." After he finished speaking, he suddenly disappeared without a trace. Ling Shoren followed closely behind. He glanced at King Ping before stepping into the void and disappearing. King Ping's injuries had mostly healed. He was talking with Chu Li in his bedroom. Chu Li sighed. "Your Royal Highness, I think the Elder Ancestor wants to send troops." "Yes." King Ping reclined on the bed with a brocade robe in his arms. His face was still pale and his eyes were dull. He sighed. "The Elder Ancestor has always wanted the Ji dynasty to become stronger. He thinks that it's a good time to act in troubled times." Chu Li said, "The situation is unclear now. If we suddenly fall into a war, I'm afraid the Ji dynasty will be surrounded by enemies. It'll be unimaginable. It's better to play it safe. Unfortunately, the Elder Ancestor wants to take the risk." King Ping sighed. "I don't think my brother can dissuade the Elder Ancestor." "Your Elder Ancestor is a celestial being," Chu Li said. King Ping was stunned and fell into deep thought. Chu Li said, "These celestial beings came with a mission. If they can complete it, they'll be rewarded handsomely. It's said that the Outland's reward is very generous and can change their fate. That's why these celestial beings are working so hard." King Ping frowned. "The Elder Ancestor can't be? Even if it's not for the celestial being's mission, there must be some influence in the depths of their hearts. This influence is enough." Chu Li said, "That's why your Royal Highness should have a good talk with His Majesty and persuade him not to let your Elder Ancestor act recklessly." Sigh. King Ping smiled bitterly. "My brother can't stop the Elder Ancestor's decision. Are we just going to mess around with the Ji dynasty?" Chu Li frowned. "Once the war breaks out, the people who die are innocent. If we lose, the Fu dynasty might not mediate. They might even take the opportunity to destroy the Ji dynasty." King Ping frowned and pondered. He was not optimistic about the outcome of this war. The Zheng dynasty was definitely stronger than the Ji dynasty. If there were no other strong reinforcements, it would be difficult for the Ji dynasty to win. Although there were ways to win by surprise, more often than not, it was a head-on confrontation. Most of the time, the outcome of a war was decided outside of the battlefield. Chu Li said, "He's a celestial being now. He might not be that concerned about the Ji dynasty. What he cares about is the Leng clan's interests in the Outland. He won't really care about the interests of this world." "All right, I'll persuade my brother." King Ping nodded slowly. He was moved by Chu Li's words. The Elder Ancestor's celestial being had determined that he would indeed care more about the Leng clan's interests in the Outland. It was too unfair that he did not care about the interests of this world. Chu Li sighed in relief and smiled. The celestial beings wanted chaos to come. Chaos would stimulate people's potential and allow them to enter the Grandmaster's boundary faster. However, chaos would also cause many wars. Grandmasters would also fall quickly and enter the Grandmaster's boundary. This was taking away the foundation of this world to strengthen the Outland. Although it was to deal with the Azura boundary, it did not benefit this world at all. As a person of this world, he naturally did not want to be so selfless and allow the Outland to do whatever it wanted. He bid farewell to King Ping's imperial residence. Lu Yurong did not return to Goddess Attraction Mountain. Instead, she returned to the Ren public house. She was homesick after leaving the High Duke's public house for so long. She wanted to stay in the High Duke's public house for a while before returning to Goddess Attraction Mountain. When Chu Li saw this, he brought Shao Qi and Shao Shi back to the public house. They had been away from the High Duke's public house for some time. Meanwhile, Pang Shiji practiced his swordsmanship on Goddess Attraction Mountain. In the early morning, he was cultivating in the courtyard when Xue Ling's white clothes fluttered in, accompanied by a faint fragrance. Chapter 1830. Chu Li's face darkened. A declaration of war? Xue nodded. A declaration of war. I heard that the Tiger Tally has been issued. The Emperor will personally lead the army and King Ping will be the vanguard. A declaration of war. Chu Li shook his head and sighed. He was slightly disappointed. It seemed that King Ping did not manage to convince Ling Shoren, or rather, Ling Shoren could not withstand the pressure from Ling Zhifei and could only listen to him. This was the worst situation. He had already threatened Ling Zhifei not to declare war, but he did not care. It seemed that Ling Zhifei was determined to drag the Great Ji dynasty into this. Once the war started, the people would be the most unfortunate. Ling Zhifei could still return to the Grandmaster's boundary, no matter how big the mess here was. Xue sighed. The imperial household wants to mobilize people from the 12 public houses to participate in the war. Once the imperial household gives the order, each public house must send 3 grandmasters to serve. This is the rule of the public houses. Chu Li frowned. He had a bad feeling. Does the public houses decide who to go or the imperial household? The imperial household, Xue said softly, hesitating to speak. Chu Li scoffed. They won't send me there, right? Yes. Xue nodded and said helplessly, You are one of the 3, the other 2 are the second young master and the third lady. Anyone can be mobilized? Chu Li frowned. Xue said, As long as it's a grandmaster, no one in the public house can refuse, not even the eldest young master. Chu Li scoffed. How domineering! Xue quickly nodded. Master, do you want to refuse? Master, you're a disciple of Goddess Attraction Mountain. Logically, you don't belong to the Great Ji dynasty. There's really no need for you to serve the Great Ji dynasty. It's better to go to the battlefield. Chu Li sighed and shook his head. I cannot be a citizen of the Great Ji dynasty, but I can't not be a member of the public house. Xue pursed her lips and nodded without saying a word. She knew how Chu Li felt about the public house. The public house was his root, his home. He could not betray or leave. Chu Li paced with his hands behind his back. He slowly walked out of the courtyard and walked along the cobblestone path on the island. Unknowingly, the small island had undergone a great change. Everything had changed, but he could not feel it. At this moment, with his complicated feelings, he suddenly realized that the small island had been modified by Xue Ling to be extremely exquisite. Xue Ling spent almost all of her time on this small island. She would either read the scrolls of the Glories Will Institute or find someone to modify the island. Slowly, it became what it was today. Every blade of grass and every tree revealed Xue Ling's painstaking efforts. Xue Ling blindly followed behind him. The two of them walked around the island and returned to the courtyard. Master, are you really going to the battlefield? Xue Ling frowned. Chu Li asked, Schweling, what do you think? Shwe shook her head lightly and said, I don't think the key to this matter is going to the battlefield. It doesn't matter to you, master. Now that Chu Li was the world's #1 master, he had an awe-inspiring reputation. She felt very confident. When she walked in the public house, none of the protectors dared to look down on her. They were all polite to her, even when she was walking on the streets of Chongming town. All of this was thanks to her young master. She was proud and felt that no one would be a threat to her young master, so it didn't matter whether he went to the battlefield or not. The one who died would definitely be someone else. Chu Li smiled and said, Continue. The key is the royal order. Schweling frowned and said, Master, you can't follow the royal order. Otherwise, there will be a second time. The emperor will definitely take advantage of you. He can't order you alone, so he will use the public house to threaten you. Chu Li said, Then what should I do? Leave the public house? Master, you will definitely not agree. Schweling shook her head and said, But master, you can look for the emperor. Although the emperor is an enlightened master, he can't defeat master. Just teach him a good lesson. If he dares to do anything rash, then teach him a good lesson. Let's see if he can withstand the beating. She knew that Chu Li would definitely not leave the public house. Not to mention the influence of the madam, more importantly, he was someone who cherished old friendship. Every time he came back, he would go to the East Garden to drink and chat with Li Yu. Things in the world were both simple and complicated. The complicated part was that people's hearts were complicated and unpredictable. The simple part was that the strong were respected. Her young master's martial arts was the best in the world. If that was the case, then he had the right to do whatever he wanted. He was not someone the emperor could order. Chu Li chuckled. Schweling's thoughts coincided with his. She really did want to teach Ling Shoren a lesson. This matter could not be started. Otherwise, there would be endless trouble. The public house was here. Even with the protection of his formation, it could not be flawless. After all, there were many protectors in the public house. Moreover, there were protectors who went out to work every day. It was easy for outsiders to attack the public house, especially Celestials. They all knew that he valued the public house. That was why they did not dare to simply cause trouble for fear of revenge. However, once they saw that Chu Li accepted the transfer order because of the public house, they would be like wolves that smelled blood. They would use the public house to threaten him. If that happened, not only would he be in trouble, but the public house would also be in grave danger. Schweling frowned and said, But this matter is not that easy. If master does not comply with the imperial edict, the public house will be punished. Moreover, this matter has already spread to the world. Once the emperor has spoken, it cannot be changed, especially at a time like this. If master could refuse the imperial edict and force the emperor to change his order, then the other public houses would not be willing to accept it. If that was the case, wouldn't the dignity of the imperial family be lost? The emperor would not allow it. Even if they were to be taught a lesson, they would have to endure it. Chu Li nodded. Schweling sighed and said, So it seems that master only has one choice. Even if you beat the emperor up, it will be useless. Chu Li said, I have to try. Schweling nodded hard. She hated the emperor and wanted Chu Li to teach him a lesson. The imperial garden of the imperial house, a bright moon hung in the sky. The moonlight was like a veil, shrouding everything. Everything seemed hazy and beautiful. The imperial garden was brightly lit. Ling Shoren and Ling Zhifei were sitting in the gazebo, discussing the deployment of troops. Elder Ancestor, I feel that it is not appropriate to send troops so rashly. Ling Shoren was dressed in a bright yellow robe. Under the light, he looked noble. However, his expression was solemn and hesitant as he stared at Ling Zhifei. King Ping, Ling Shouqian's words echoed in his ears. He did not want to think about it, but he could not help but think that the elder ancestor was a celestial after all. He might not really care about the Ji dynasty wholeheartedly. It was better to be cautious. Moreover, King Ping had admitted that even if they sent troops, they had no chance of winning. They would most likely lose. Even if King Ping's military strategy was brilliant, he could not rely on luck, because the Zheng dynasty also had a genius in the art of war who was not inferior to him. Ling Shoren was a little hesitant, but he could not dissuade the determined Ling Zhifei. Ling Zhifei stared at him coldly, declining before the battle. You're really useless as an emperor. Elder ancestor, the Zheng dynasty's strength is indeed higher than ours, Ling Shoren said. So what? Ling Zhifei scoffed. We killed many of their celestials last time. The celestials of the Zheng dynasty's imperial family are probably all dead. When the time comes, I will personally deal with the Zheng dynasty's emperor. But, Ling Shoren frowned. Although he wanted to object, the elder ancestor's prestige was too high. He had always been wise and powerful. Ling Shoren was far inferior to him, so he did not have the confidence to refute. Chapter 1831. Ling Zhifei scoffed. What buts? Ling Shoren said, Elder ancestor, I'm worried about Chu Li. If we treat him like this, he'll definitely be angered. Will he come here and even kill me? Heh, you're really… Ling Zhifei shook his head and sighed. You're such a bad judge of character. Ling Shoren felt awkward, but his expression remained calm. He fist saluted. Elder ancestor, please guide me. I think this is a dangerous step. I know a little about Chu Li. He's stubborn and unyielding. He may seem easygoing, but he's actually very stubborn and will never obey orders. This step will definitely anger him. He won't even blink when he kills the other emperors. Chen Jinji of the Qiu dynasty and 2 emperors of the Fu dynasty died in his hands. I won't make a difference. How can you compare to the emperors of the Zheng dynasty and Fu dynasty? Ling Zhifei said snappily. You're the emperor of the Ji dynasty and he's a citizen of the Ji dynasty. Ling Shoren pondered. Ling Zhifei said. He killed the emperors of the Qiu dynasty and Fu dynasty. The people of the Ji dynasty cheered and saw him as a hero. However, if he kills you, he'll be a traitor. He'll be cursed for the rest of his life. Ling Shoren nodded slowly. Then, he shook his head. That's true, but he's no longer in the Ji dynasty. He belongs to Goddess Attraction Mountain and belongs to the Fu dynasty. He might not care about such empty titles. At his level, empty titles don't matter anymore. This is the first obstacle. Ling Zhifei raised his left index finger. The second obstacle is feelings. You've noticed that he's a sentimental person. Yes. Ling Shoren nodded. He's a sentimental person indeed. There was a hint of disdain in his tone. As a person who did not care about sentiments, he was naturally repulsed by sentimental people. Their existence seemed to serve as a foil to his ruthlessness and cruelty. It was truly displeasing. Ling Zhifei raised his left middle finger and said coldly, Sentimental people are the weakest and easiest to manipulate. As long as we hold on to what he values, so what if he's the best in martial arts? He has martial arts but he can't use it. He's trapped by his emotions. He glanced at Ling Shoren coldly. Ling Shoren furrowed his brows and said, I know that he values the House of High Duke the most because he was born there, and it's also his wife's home. That's right. Ling Zhifei scoffed and said, As long as we control the House of High Dukes, he won't be able to escape from us. Even if we have to teach you a lesson, we won't kill you. At most, we'll just teach you a lesson. Ling Shoren let out a bitter smile, his heart palpitating. He did not want to experience Chu Li's torture again. It was worse than death, and the mere thought of it sent chills down his spine. Ling Zhifei said, Don't worry, I'm here. I won't allow him to torture you. Sigh. Ling Shoren sighed. Ling Zhifei said, He has 2 wives, right? 2 wives are 2 shackles, and with the addition of King An's imperial residence, that's 3 shekels. There's also the burden of his original reputation, so that's 4 shekels. Under these 4 shekels, it'll be very difficult for him to break free and make up his mind to kill you. Ancestor. Lung Shoren smiled bitterly. Last time, I knew he wanted to kill me. That's because you touched his reverse scale. Lung Zhifei scoffed and said, this shows how much he values relationships. He's willing to kill for them, and he's willing to suffer for them. Trust me, he'll definitely listen to your orders. Ling Shoren still had no confidence. He felt that Chu Li would not give in so easily. Clap clap, clap clap. Applause suddenly rang out. Ling Zhifei and Ling Shoren immediately turned their heads and looked around, trying to find the source of the sound. However, the surroundings were filled with flowers. The exotic flowers and plants were full of life under the daytime light, but there was no sign of anyone. The 2 of them leaped into the void and looked down at the entire imperial garden. The imperial garden was empty. There was not a single imperial maid. They had all been chased out to prevent them from listening to their discussion. Are the 2 of you looking for me? Chu Li suddenly appeared in front of them. It was as if there was a door in the void. He pushed the door open and took a step forward. Chu Li. Ling Shoren shuddered and sighed to himself. He finally came looking for him. He could not help but recall the situation when he was attacked by the Thunder Sword of God. His body trembled uncontrollably, and he could not help but want to escape. Lung Zhifei scoffed. Chu Li, are you here for the conscription? Chu Li shook his head. I'd like to ask, Elder Ancestor, why did you declare war on the Jing dynasty? For the prosperity of the Ji dynasty, of course. Lung Zhifei scoffed. Chu Li could not help but laugh as he shook his head. Elder Ancestor, do you think I'm a 3-year-old? How dare you say such deceitful words? Although the Jing dynasty is strong, almost all of their celestials have been killed. It's a good opportunity to take advantage of the situation, Lung Zhifei said. Moreover, I've already made an agreement with the Qiu dynasty's imperial family to send troops together. Chu Li raised his eyebrows. The Qiu dynasty? Chen Chongmao? Yes, Lung Zhifei said. Do you think I'm a 3-year-old who would treat the Ji dynasty as a game if I'm not confident of winning? Chu Li shook his head disapprovingly. If the Qiu dynasty joins forces with you, what about the Fu dynasty and the Li dynasty? One word from the Fu dynasty and the Qiu dynasty will immediately become your enemy. There's also the Li dynasty. Will they take the opportunity to join forces with the Jing dynasty to attack the Ji dynasty? Lung Zhifei smiled. The Li dynasty. They have you, Chu Li. Chu Li frowned. Lung Zhifei said, I know you have a good relationship with the Bishop of the Holy Church of Light. The Bishop of the Holy Church of Light has great influence on the Li dynasty. As long as she says the word, the Li dynasty won't make a move. As for the Fu dynasty, they can't even fend for themselves now. Moreover, there's Goddess Attraction Mountain. The Fu dynasty's imperial family is weak, while the Goddess Attraction Mountain is strong. As long as the Goddess Attraction Mountain doesn't say anything, the Fu dynasty won't make a move. As long as you join the Ji dynasty's army, the Ji dynasty will definitely win. Chu Li, as a disciple of the Ji dynasty, you won't object, right? Moreover, we're just borrowing your name. You don't have to do anything. Chu Li said coldly, Elder Ancestor, you're really scheming. Lung Zhifei smiled calmly. Everything is for the Ji dynasty and the people of the Ji dynasty. Chu Li said, Then I'll tell you, Elder Ancestor. Although I have a good relationship with the Bishop of the Holy Church of Light, personal feelings don't matter when the country is at stake. If the Ji dynasty sends troops, the Li dynasty will definitely take advantage of the situation. Lung Zhifei frowned. Chu Li scoffed. As for Goddess Attraction Mountain, that's a joke. Goddess Attraction Mountain doesn't care about worldly affairs. No matter how weak the Fu dynasty's imperial family is, Goddess Attraction Mountain won't suppress them. They'll only support them. Moreover, I'm only a disciple of Goddess Attraction Mountain and my master is above me. The Fu dynasty's imperial family will never allow the Ji dynasty to take advantage of the situation. The Qiu dynasty isn't reliable at all. Even if there's a celestial being there to suppress them, it'll be useless. It's not like the Fu dynasty doesn't have a celestial being. That was then, and this was now. Back then, he was dissatisfied with the Fu dynasty's tyrannical and shameless behavior. He wanted to overthrow the Fu dynasty's rule, but now, he wanted to maintain the original situation. He did not want any more variables to prevent the people from being plunged into misery and suffering. So, Chu Li, you don't want to help? Ling Zhifei's eyes flashed like lightning. Chu Li said slowly, "Forgive me for my incompetence. Please retract your order." Chapter 1832. Unfortunately, he was a celestial being and was born at the wrong time. At this time, even if he was talented, bold, and wise, it was better to keep it to himself. In a situation where Celestials and Asuras were rampaging, stability was the priority and fewer people would die as much as possible. If it was before the Celestials descended, he would have supported them wholeheartedly and overthrown the Fu dynasty's rule. Now, however, it was the complete opposite. Not only did he not support it, but he also opposed it and wanted to dispel his thoughts of sending troops. Ling Zhifei narrowed his eyes. The electricity in his eyes intensified as his thoughts raced. The fact that Chu Li was able to stay in the vicinity without him noticing meant that Chu Li's cultivation level was slightly higher than his. If it was someone else, he would be able to gain the upper hand with his soul tracking palm and defeat someone stronger than him. However, the soul tracking palm was ineffective against Chu Li. If they really fought, he might not be Chu Li's match. "I've already declared war, how can I take it back?" Ling Zhifei took a deep breath and shook his head. He declared war in advance to stop those who opposed it. Most of the 12 High Dukes' public houses and the courtiers were against sending troops because the Jing dynasty was not weak. Even if they could win, it would be a bitter battle and the Li dynasty would take advantage of it. Chu Li frowned and said, "The war hasn't started yet, why can't I take it back?" "Great Ancestor, are you really going to disregard the people of the world for your own selfishness and turn the Ji dynasty into hell on earth?" To this world, hell was the next level. To the sky beyond heaven, the world he was in was hell. That was why the Celestials did not care about this place. They were not afraid of destruction and killed wantonly, all for the sake of increasing the power of the sky beyond heaven. Ling Zhifei said, "Chu Li, how about this? I'll take a step back." Chu Li looked at him coldly. Ling Zhifei said, "As long as you help me once, I won't conscript you. What do you think?" Chu Li shook his head. What he wanted was not only to not conscript him, but to stop the war. Ling Zhifei said, "As long as you assassinate the Jing dynasty's emperor, I won't conscript you anymore. Even the people from the Yi public house and the Run public house can stay out of the war." Chu Li sneered. Ling Zhifei said, "Although killing the emperor of the Jing dynasty will not cause chaos in the country, it will be enough to weaken them. Moreover, it will deal a huge blow to their confidence and also intimidate the rulers of the other countries. In this way, the Ji dynasty will definitely win. You don't have to worry about the suffering of the people if the Ji dynasty loses. Saving the people from disaster is a great merit, why not?" Chu Li scoffed and said, "Great Ancestor, you should stop your wishful thinking." Chu Li. Ling Zhifei was slightly annoyed. "Even if you're the #1 master in the world, you're just a boorish fellow who can't see the bigger picture. Do you think that the other countries will let us off just because the Ji dynasty didn't declare war?" Chu Li frowned. He immediately understood Ling Zhifei's plan. If Chu Li did not agree, Ling Zhifei could retract his order, but he would find a way to make the Zheng dynasty declare war and attack the Ji dynasty. In this case, Chu Li could only help. This was not difficult for Leng Zhifei. They were both celestials, so they must be connected. All he had to do was collude with the celestials of the Zheng dynasty. Leng Zhifei scoffed. In this world, if you don't kill, others will kill you. So the best way to protect yourself is to take the initiative and attack. Don't wait for the other countries to declare war on us. We can win the initiative and morale by declaring war first. Chaos is coming, and no one can stop this trend. Even if you're the #1 master in the world, you can't stop it. Chu Li said, "Isn't it all because of you celestials? Kill all the celestials and see if there's still chaos in the world." Chu Li's expression was calm and his tone was indifferent, but it sent a chill down Leng Zhifei's spine. It was obvious that Chu Li was determined. If he really did this, it would be a disaster for the Celestials. The Celestials paid a huge price to come here with an important mission. If they could not complete the mission and return to the Outland, it would be a great blow to the Celestials and their sects and forces. Leng Zhifei frowned. "Chu Li, aren't you going to ascend to the Outland? What's so good about the Outland?" Chu Li shook his head. "Although this world isn't perfect, it's wonderful enough. It's good to stay here." Leng Zhifei said, "This world is like the bottom of a well. Do you want to be a frog and not jump out to see the wider world? The Outland is 1,000 times bigger than this world. It's rich in spiritual energy and has more beautiful sceneries. It's easy to live for 10,000 years, but in this world..." He shook his head as he spoke. Comparing this world to the Outland was like comparing a desolate village in the countryside to Fairy's capital. Why would the people in Fairy's capital want to live in a remote and desolate village? It was worse than death. Chu Li smiled. The Outland was beautiful, but he did not have his woman or his relatives there. Why would he go there? If he could condense the Chakram Pagoda in his body, even if Shao Qi and the others could not become enlightened masters, they would not need to ascend to the Outland after they died. He could save them and reincarnate. How wonderful would that be? Therefore, he had the confidence to ignore the Outland and kill all the Celestials. He was not going to the Outland anyway, so he was not afraid of offending the sects in the Outland. It was fine as long as he could stay in this world. "Chu Li, are you really not going to help?" Leng Zhifei asked. Chu Li replied, "If the elder ancestor really sends his troops, I'll have no choice but to fight back and send you to heaven." All right. Leng Zhifei gritted his teeth and sneered. He nodded. As expected of the world's #1 master, Chu Li asked, "Has the elder ancestor made a decision?" As he spoke, his white robe fluttered and he slowly released his aura. The heaven god's field pressed down on Leng Zhifei and Leng Shoren's heads like a mountain. Leng Zhifei said, "If you kill me, the Zheng dynasty will definitely take advantage of the situation. Shoren won't be able to stop them. Even if you're the world's #1 master, you're not good at politics and battle formations. You won't be able to stop the Zheng dynasty. So, I can't touch the elder ancestor?" Chu Li laughed and lightly struck out with his palm. A golden light fell from the sky and shot directly at Leng Zhifei. It turned into a golden palm print in front of him and shot down like a meteor, reaching him in a flash. Leng Zhifei scoffed angrily. He did not expect Chu Li to really attack him. Leng Shoren was about to step forward and stop him when he saw Chu Li's azure blue eyes flash. He could not help but take a step back. He immediately remembered that he already had a treasure to protect himself and could block Chu Li's strange attack. Thus, he took another step forward and scoffed. "Chu Li, don't be rude." Chu Li said, "It seems that your majesty has something up your sleeve. Let's try it." As soon as he finished speaking, he shot out the god-punishing thunder sword. At the same time, he struck out with both palms. 2 golden lights fell on Leng Zhifei, forcing him to take it head-on. The Supreme Vajra palm was too fast, so he could not use the Soul Pursuit palm against Chu Li. Bang! Ling Shoren took a step back and a golden light flashed on his wrist. Chu Li raised an eyebrow. Vajra Sarira? It was strange that the Vajra Sarira from the Titanium Temple was in his hands. Ling Shoren calmed down and said, Chu Li, as a subject of the Ji dynasty, you dare to kill the late emperor? Why not? Chu Li said, Is the emperor tired of living? Wouldn't it be better to give you a piece of heaven and let King Ping be the emperor? You? Ling Shoren's expression changed. Chu Li said, That's why your majesty better not force me to kill you. Chapter 1833. He was extremely dissatisfied with Ling Shoren as the emperor. Ling Shoren was proficient in government affairs and had the support of all the ministers in the court. The relationship between the emperor and his ministers was harmonious, which was a rare sight to behold. However, Ling Shoren was soft on the inside. He might seem tough and cold, but he was only like that to outsiders. He was afraid of death and lacked the courage of a martial artist. In this aspect, he was far from King Ping, Ling Shoqian. His blood and iron were ingrained in his bones, and he disregarded life and death. This was what a wise emperor should be like. Ling Shoren took a deep breath. He was not afraid of death, but he could not stand Chu Li's methods. Bang 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 bang. Ling Zhifei and the Supreme Vajra Palm exchanged 100 blows in the blink of an eye. However, the flowers and plants around them did not move at all. Unlike other enlightened masters who fought earth-shattering and destructive battles, nothing was left intact. The enlightened master's energy was pure and overbearing, and almost nothing could stop it. Chu Li's Supreme Vajra Palm was pure and restrained as if it was solid. Even if it was shattered, it would not lose its purity and would not scatter in all directions to hurt the people around it. Instead, it would turn into pure spiritual energy and be absorbed by Chu Li. After 100 blows, Chu Li's expression did not change as he looked at Ling Shoren. Your Majesty, how did you get this Vajra relic? The relics left behind by the Titanium Temple's eminent monks were extremely precious, especially to the Titanium Temple's disciples. They could use the relics to enhance their understanding of divine powers and save a lot of time. Therefore, Vajra relics were rarely circulated outside unless they were gifted by the Titanium Temple, like his own Vajra relic. This belongs to me. Ling Zhifei scoffed. Chu Li raised his eyebrows. Ling Zhifei said, I got this Vajra relic from a monk from the Titanium Temple. Chu Li raised his eyebrows and smiled. Anything that can make a master from the Titanium Temple trade is definitely not ordinary. As he spoke, he attacked with his palms as if he was chatting or sparring with friends, concealing his murderous intent. Ling Zhifei looked like he had time to spare as he waved both of his palms to block every single Supreme Vajra palm. He knew that Chu Li was planning to deplete his inner energy, and that was exactly what he was planning to do. Since he was still a Deva, he had an exceptional affinity with the spiritual energy of the Outland. That was why his spiritual energy decreased at an exceptionally fast pace, and his inner energy recovered at an exceptionally fast pace. This was a unique advantage. Even if his cultivation level was slightly lower than Chu Li's, he could still overtake Chu Li with this advantage. As long as they continued fighting like this, the longer the battle dragged on, the more obvious his advantage would be. By the time Chu Li felt that he was no match for him and wanted to escape, it would be too late. Then, he would have to use his trump card to defeat his enemy in one fell swoop and kill Chu Li. When he thought of this, he felt inexplicably excited. Then, he became vigilant and did not let himself get carried away. Everything was still unknown, and Chu Li was unusually cunning. For all he knew, Chu Li might escape midway if he saw that the situation was not good, so he had to talk to him to numb him. With this thought in mind, Ling Zhifei said in a deep voice, The transaction is in the area where the Titanium Temple is located. A string of Titanium Sarira prayer beads in exchange for the boundary of the Titanium Temple? Chu Li asked. Ling Zhifei said, "Everything within a 1,000-mile radius of the Titanium Temple is their boundary. I'm very sincere, so the monks of the Titanium Temple can't refuse. 1,000-mile radius in exchange for a string of titanium sarira, the elder ancestor is still the one who's profiting." Chu Li shook his head. To people outside of the Titanium Temple, the magical effect of the titanium sarira was to protect their minds and prevent them from being invaded by external evils. It could calm their bodies and minds, allowing them to achieve twice the results with half the effort during cultivation. To people in the martial arts world, it was indeed very important as it could save them a lot of time and allow them to become a master at a younger age. However, compared to the monks of the Titanium Temple, they could use it to cultivate divine powers. Ling Zhifei said faintly, "There's also my promise. As long as the Ji dynasty exists, the Titanium Temple will be outside of the law and will not be under the jurisdiction of the Ji dynasty." "I see." Chu Li nodded slowly. If that was the case, then it would make sense. The 10 lifetimes of Buddhahood cultivated by the Titanium Temple originally disregarded the laws of the world. It emphasized on the heart to be like a bright pearl and shine brightly. It was stained by the dust of the secular world and needed to be washed away bit by bit. Then, it would regain its brilliance and illuminate the world. Ling Zhifei said, "Chu Li, if you can lend me a hand and help the Ji dynasty win, I can make the decision to promote the High Duke's public house to the imperial residence. The title will be hereditary and the nobility will never be lowered. As long as the Ji dynasty exists, the Ling family will rule the country. The boundary of the public house will be a country within a country. It will not be under the jurisdiction of the Ji dynasty and will only belong to the Ji dynasty in name." Chu Li was stunned and fell into deep thought. This was indeed a great temptation. If they could really achieve this, it would be a dream come true for the High Duke's public house. The status of the High Duke's public house was quite high, but it was still the High Duke's public house and had to listen to the imperial family. Just like this conscription order, they could only obey it obediently and could not refuse or defy it. This was difficult for the High Duke's public house, who had always been a local tyrant. To the first High Duke, it might be reasonable. After all, the power of the High Duke's public house came from the imperial family. However, after a few generations, the masters of the High Duke's public house would have other thoughts. They felt that the High Duke's public house was already very benevolent to the imperial family by guarding the area. They would not be willing to obey orders unconditionally. If they could be promoted from the High Duke's public house to the imperial residence, they would be completely independent and would no longer have to listen to the imperial family. A country within a country would indeed be free from the shackles and be free. From then on, the High Duke's public house would be no different than a small court. This was too great a temptation for the High Duke's public house. It was an irresistible temptation. Ling Zhifei saw that Chu Li was tempted and quickly said, "But there's one condition. If the High Duke's public house is attacked by external enemies, the Ji dynasty will not help." Chu Li smiled. This was Ling Zhifei expressing his sincerity. Without this condition, if the public house was attacked, the Ji dynasty would send troops to help. There were too many tricks, and it would make the public house restless. After all, if any force were to attack the High Duke's public house, the Ji dynasty could legitimately enter the public house's territory. Ling Zhifei said, "What do you think?" Chu Li pondered for a while and finally took a deep breath. He shook his head and said, "No." Ling Zhifei was surprised. "You didn't discuss with the High Duke's public house or the madam. Aren't you afraid that they will blame you if they find out?" "Even if they blame me, there's nothing I can do. Has the elder ancestor decided to send troops?" Chu Li said lightly. "I'm not willing," Ling Zhifei scoffed. "Chu Li, you're too naive. Do you really think that you're thinking for the people of the world? Let me tell you, if there aren't enough grandmasters ascending to heaven, the grandmaster will not give up. Then let's give it a try." Chu Li said lightly. It seems that the elder ancestor wants to ascend to heaven. Humph, how arrogant! Leng Zhifei shook his head. He felt that Chu Li's inner energy was almost depleted and that he could gain the upper hand. He decided to use his trump card to prevent Chu Li from escaping. Thus, his body suddenly grew a lot bigger, and his loose clothes immediately fit his body. Suddenly, a vast spiritual energy surged down. His hair danced in the wind and both of his palms suddenly expanded. He lightly slapped his palms down. This palm seemed to break through the void and instantly reached Chu Li's chest. Chu Li faced the palm. Bam! He only felt a sharp inner energy drilling into his palm. It was about to break the supreme, indestructible physique. Chu Li frowned. This palm energy was strange. The palm was obviously huge, but the palm energy was not thick but sharp. Chapter 1834. Chu Li frowned and suddenly pressed his left hand on the hilt of the Sky Killing Sword. When the Sky Killing Sword was activated, his body became as sharp as the Sky Killing Sword. It was indestructible and unbreakable. The originally swift and fierce palm energy was instantly broken. Chu Li slowly discovered the wonders of the Sky Killing script. It was not only good for offense but also for defense. It also had many other uses. As long as one could think of it, its power was not limited to killing. Leng Zhifei then slapped Chu Li's chest. This palm was fast, accurate, and unpredictable. Chu Li did not even have time to think before he was hit. It was obviously some kind of secret skill that activated his potential. This kind of palm energy could not be used more than a few times. Leng Zhifei smiled. Not only did he know the soul-chasing palm, but he also knew the heart-destroying palm. This kind of palm attack was aimed directly at the heart and was unstoppable. Anyone who was hit by this heart-destroying palm would eventually have their heart turned into minced meat, unable to form a new shape and dead. As long as one was a human, even a celestial would die if their heart was crushed. No matter how strong and pure the inner energy was, without the power of the heart, the body would quickly wither and the inner energy would disappear as well. Even if Chu Li was the world's #1 master, he would definitely die after being hit by his heart-destruction palm. However, Chu Li looked at him calmly and did not move. He allowed his right palm to press on his chest. After a few breaths, he felt that Chu Li was already dead. However, Chu Li's body was still emitting the enlightened master's field. It surged like a huge wave and pressed against him, forcing him to use all his energy. Chu Li shook his head. This palm technique is really good. You. Leng Zhifei's expression changed. He suddenly felt that he was ridiculous. He thought he could destroy Chu Li's trump card, but it did not affect him at all. Chu Li's strength was beyond his imagination. Chu Li said, "This heart-destruction palm is really mysterious. I have learned it before, but unfortunately, I did not have such a high level of mastery. However, if this is all you have, you should go to heaven," he said as he slowly pulled out his sword. "Wait!" Ling Shoren shouted. Chu Li looked at him. Ling Shoren said, "Fine, I agree to withdraw the declaration of war." "Shut up!" Leng Zhifei shouted. Ling Shoren said, "Elder, at this point it is better to withdraw. If we withdraw, what will become of our Leng family?" Leng Zhifei snorted, "Won't we become the laughingstock of the world? Then tell me the truth. It was Chu Li who forced me." Leng Shoren said, "Chu Li, if I withdraw the declaration of war, you will no longer interfere with the affairs of the imperial family. Can you promise me that? Otherwise, we will fight to the death." Chu Li shook his head. "Your Majesty, forgive me for not being able to agree. The matters of the imperial family often involve the imperial residence of King'an. As the head chief of the imperial residence of King'an, how can I not care about it? Moreover, the High Duke's public house is also involved." "All right. Very well." Lung Shoren gritted his teeth and said coldly, "It seems like you are forcing me to use my last resort." Chu Li smiled and said, "Your Majesty, if you want to deal with the High Duke's public house, you should save your energy. Even though I died, I left behind a will." Lung Shoren said slowly, "Marry Lung Qing." Chu Li's expression changed slightly. His relationship with Lung Qing was quite deep. After all, she had learned swordsmanship from him and had always been practicing in his courtyard. They had spent a lot of time together and had developed feelings for each other. Even if it was not romantic, it was enough of a friendship. Lung Shoren said, "No matter how incompetent I am, I can still influence the marriage of the imperial family." Chu Li asked, "Your Majesty, who is the daughter you want to marry?" "Zhuo Qingling." Lung Shoren scoffed. Chu Li frowned and said, "The Zhuo Qingling who killed his wife and son." He knew every minister in the Ji dynasty like the back of his hand. This was thanks to his hard work during his tenure in the Secret Guardians Hall. He had flipped through almost all the files in the Secret Guardians Hall and had a clear understanding of every minister's temperament and secrets. This Zhuo Qingling was tyrannical, but he was also a general who had made countless contributions. He was stationed at the border between the Zheng dynasty and the Ji dynasty. Although there was peace with the Zheng dynasty, there were still conflicts and small-scale battles. Every time, this Zhuo Qingling won the battle. He was an arrogant general who only obeyed King Ping and was difficult to control. He was tyrannical, especially to his own people. He often whipped his own soldiers and often whipped his wives and concubines. He even did the same to his own children. In the end, he beat his wife and one of his sons to death. However, he was strict with his troop. When something like this happened, he immediately issued a gag order. Not a single word spread, but it did not escape the all-knowing Secret Guardians Hall. If the Secret Guardians Hall knew, so did the Emperor. However, because Zhuo Qingling had made great contributions and could win the battle despite his shortcomings, he pretended not to know and turned a blind eye to it. Chu Li was well aware of this. He did not expect Lung Shoren to marry Lung Qing. This was equivalent to pushing Lung Qing into a pit of fire. His aura surged like raging waves. His azure blue eyes suddenly flashed. Bang! Lung Shoren staggered a step back. The titanium sarira on his wrist flashed again. Lung Shoren's expression changed and he said, "Chu Li, it's useless even if you kill me. Once I die, this edict will be carried out. No matter how strong King An's imperial residence is, they will have to listen to me. I can't order you, but I can order King An's imperial residence." Chu Li said, "I'd like to see who dares to carry out the edict. Moreover, once you die, Your Majesty, King Ping will inherit the throne. I believe he won't follow the edict." "Humph, do you really think that the Crown Prince will inherit the throne after I die?" Lung Shoren shook his head and laughed. "You're too naive. After I die, Feng Heir will inherit the throne. He will definitely follow the edict even if you want to kill him." Chu Li said, "Then I'll send you and your son to heaven together. Alright, let's see if you have the gut. So what if I die once?" Lung Shoren's face darkened and he looked stern. Bang bang bang. Chu Li's eyes flashed with azure blue light again. Then, 3 god-slaying thunder swords shot out. Lung Shoren was no longer afraid of Chu Li's swords. He smiled proudly. Chu Li scoffed. "It seems that even the elder ancestor doesn't know that the titanium sarira has its limits. It can't withstand the power of the soul indefinitely. This titanium sarira has been around for too long and has suffered too much damage. It won't last long." As he spoke, he had already unsheathed the sky regal sword. Suddenly, the space around them was locked. Ling Zhifei and Lung Shoren felt an invisible force binding them. They could not move their bodies. It was as if they were tied up and sent to the chopping board to be slaughtered. It was an uncomfortable feeling. The two struggled but to no avail. They could only watch as the sword fell. Once it fell, they would be beheaded. Hold on, I agree. Leng Shoren shouted. I agree to withdraw the declaration of war. He saw that Chu Li was determined. It seemed that there was no way to make him yield. Chu Li's sky-regal sword suddenly stopped. It was only a foot away from Ling Shoren's face. He said, Swear. Once an enlightened master made an oath, it would be a great oath. It was very effective, and no enlightened master would dare to violate it. Okay, I swear. Ling Shoren gritted his teeth and was about to swear. Shut up. Leng Zhifei roared and pounced at Chu Li to meet the sky-regal sword. Chu Li squinted and flipped his sword. The blade met Leng Zhifei's attack and sent him flying. Swear. Chu Li said, or else this sword will be the blade. Okay. Leng Shoren gritted his teeth and swore. Chapter 1835. Chu Li nodded calmly. Enlightened masters were different from mortals. Once they made an oath, they would be connected to heaven and earth. If they disobeyed the oath, they would be punished by lightning and would never be able to reincarnate. Ling Shoren's face darkened as he glared at Chu Li. Are you satisfied now? Chu Li smiled. Don't blame me, Your Majesty. I just don't want the people to suffer. As a celestial being, I naturally want everyone to ascend to heaven. There's no need to rush. Leng Zhifei's face darkened. He scoffed and looked at Ling Shoren with disappointment. Letting the Grandmasters ascend is for the sake of the Grandmaster. Once the Grandmaster falls into the Azura's boundary, we won't be able to escape. Chu Li, you're so disregarding the bigger picture. How disappointing! Ling Shoren was not going to amount to much. If he died, he would at most return to the Grandmaster to be punished. As long as he completed his mission and let more Grandmasters ascend to heaven, he would be exempted from punishment and the Ji dynasty would be strengthened. Hence, he did not have to care about his own life. However, Ling Shoren was not calm and clear. He was swayed by his emotions and was soft-hearted. Even though it was for him, Leng Zhifei still felt disappointed and dissatisfied with Ling Shoren. He felt that it would be difficult for the ancestral foundation to be strengthened in his hands. Now that the world was in chaos, the Ji dynasty would be in danger if they met an emperor who was outwardly strong but inwardly weak. Once the oath was made, there would be no war and his mission would be difficult to complete. It would be useless even if he stayed here for a long time. Ling Shoren was useless. His heart was filled with dissatisfaction but he suppressed it. Chu Li smiled. Actually, there's no need to rush. Back then, there weren't many Grandmasters who could ascend to the Grandmaster's boundary. Normal Grandmasters would still have to enter the cycle of reincarnation after death. However, things have changed in the past 2 years. Every Grandmaster can ascend to heaven after death. It's obvious that the Grandmaster's boundary has relaxed its restrictions. Back then, only the Holy Church of Light and a few other sects could ascend to the Grandmaster's boundary. It was extremely rare. Normal Grandmasters would still have to enter the cycle of reincarnation after death and could not ascend to the Grandmaster's boundary. However, it was different now. It seemed like any Grandmaster who died could enter the Grandmaster's boundary. It seemed like a good thing, but it gave him a sense of danger. It was a sign of chaos. Previously, Grandmasters were not able to enter the Grandmaster's boundary because they cherished their lives. Conflicts were avoided as much as possible, especially between Grandmasters. However, now that they could enter the Grandmaster's boundary once they died, they were no longer afraid of death. Once they were not afraid of death, how could they be restrained? How many people would be able to suppress a Grandmaster who had broken free from the shackles? How could the world not be in chaos? At the end of the day, it was all a conspiracy by the Grandmasters. This made Chu Li hate the Grandmasters even more. Leng Zhifei frowned at Chu Li. Chu Li said, since the Grandmaster can relax its restrictions once, it can be relaxed a second time. Maybe even an innate master can enter the Grandmaster's boundary, right? When that time comes, will realm beyond Avalon have to worry about not having enough manpower? It's impossible to relax it to the innate realm. Leng Zhifei snorted. Chu Li chuckled and said sarcastically, "Is there anything the Grandmasters can't do?" Leng Zhifei shook his head and said, "Grandmasters can quickly recover their cultivation level if they go there, but innate masters can't. It's useless even if they go there. That's why the Grandmaster can't relax its restrictions to innate masters." Chu Li nodded thoughtfully. "That's why you Celestials want to create more Grandmasters and let more Grandmasters die. The battlefield can stimulate one's potential. In addition to the influence of military flags and military formations, one's cultivation will be faster and they will die faster. That's why you must start a war." "Nonsense." Leng Zhifei's expression did not change. He shook his head lightly. However, he felt a chill in his heart. Chu Li really lived up to his reputation of being smart. He could actually see through this. Chu Li glanced at Ling Shoren. "Your Majesty should understand this, right?" Ling Shoren nodded slowly. He knew this, but the world was in such a state. It was better to go with the flow and take the opportunity to let the Ji dynasty rise. He could also get a higher position in the Ling family of the Grandmaster's boundary. That was why he had been hesitant and did not oppose to sending troops. Chu Li sighed and shook his head. "Greed has blinded me. I have nothing to say. Since your Majesty has sworn, I shall take my leave." He closed fist saluted and glanced at Leng Zhifei before disappearing. Leng Zhifei took a deep breath to suppress his anger. His face suddenly turned pale and his body swayed. Every time he unlocked the seal, he would lose 40 years of time in this world. The time left for him was even shorter. This was not a big deal. However, he could not do anything to Chu Li after unlocking the seal. "Elder Ancestor?" Leng Shoren quickly supported him. Leng Zhifei pushed his hand away. "I won't die yet." Leng Shoren sighed. "Elder Ancestor, do you think that I shouldn't swear? As an emperor, you're being threatened. This is a disgrace to the Ling family." Leng Zhifei sat down heavily in the gazebo and gritted his teeth. "Look at Chu Li. He would rather die than be threatened. Learn from him." He originally thought that Chu Li was a sentimental person. Even as an enlightened master, he would still be affected by worldly sentiment. When he recruited the 3 people from the High Duke's public house, he would obediently agree to it. This was because Chu Li should understand his intentions. If he did not agree, he would recruit Shaoqi instead. Due to the influence of righteousness, Chu Li did not want to be cursed. Chu Li would not kill the Ji dynasty's emperor. However, he did not expect Chu Li to be so unyielding. He would rather break than bend. He came straight to his door and almost killed him. If Ling Shoren did not swear, he would really die under his sword. Chu Li's swordsmanship was too evil. Ling Shoren smiled bitterly. "Elder Ancestor, he can do this because of his cultivation level. I don't have such a deep cultivation level." "It's not cultivation level, it's temperament," Leng Zhifei said impatiently. "If he wants to kill me, let him. I don't believe that he would dare to kill you. Aren't you afraid of his torture? That's why you gave in?" Sigh. Ling Shoren shook his head. This elder ancestor was really unreasonable. Leng Zhifei glared at him. "I think you shouldn't be the emperor. Let 4th brother be the emperor." Leng Shoren frowned and slowly shook his head. "Elder ancestor, let's not talk about whether I abdicate or not. Even if I abdicate, Feng heir will take over. King Ping's crown prince title is just to fool Chu Li. I think 4th brother is more suitable to be the emperor than you. Your son is even more useless." Leng Zhifei shook his head. Ling Shoren said in a low voice, "Elder ancestor, I can listen to you on other matters, but I want to make my own decision about the succession." He had always addressed himself as I in front of Ling Zhifei and not I. This time, he addressed himself as I. It was obvious that he was putting on the airs of an emperor. Ling Zhifei narrowed his eyes, his pupils constricted. He smiled faintly and said, "Have you ever thought that once someone like Lung Feng becomes a heavenly deity, he will only be ranked at the bottom amongst all the heavenly deities? I can first empower him, then pass on the throne and become an enlightened master," Ling Shoren said in a low voice. This was how he obtained the position. He had already received the secret skill that could greatly increase Ling Feng's strength. When he became an enlightened master, he would be even stronger. Although he could not become the top-notch enlightened master, he would not be at the bottom. So what? Ling Zhifei shook his head. He's not only lacking in martial arts, but also in wisdom. He's much weaker than you. Do you admit this? Ling Shoren remained silent. Ling Zhifei scoffed. You're just showing off for your own pleasure. You don't care about the great Ji dynasty or the Lung clan. You should know the consequences. I will never pass on the throne to King Ping, Ling Shoren said in a low voice. He gave a fist salute. Elder ancestor, please recuperate. I'll take my leave first. Chapter 1836. Ling Zhifei narrowed his eyes as he stared at his back. His gait was majestic, and he did have the majesty of an emperor. Unfortunately, he was a weak fellow who was afraid of pain and selfish. He only wanted to pass the throne to his son and did not care if his son was suitable or not. Sigh. He sighed. How could there be such a good thing as an emperor? He had to care about the country and his family. The most ruthless of all was the imperial family. Under the rule of the country and within the imperial power, there was no possibility of personal feelings. Even an emperor had no choice but to make decisions for him. Ever since Ling Shoren displayed his tough stance in front of Ling Zhifei, he didn't go to see Ling Zhifei for 3 days straight. He didn't want to see him again. He was the emperor, but he had to listen to an emperor emeritus telling him what to do. He had already issued the edict to withdraw the war. The enlistment of the 3 armies was withdrawn. The public houses and the armies all retreated and no longer gathered at the Zheng dynasty's border. The journey was back to normal. The dark clouds of war had dispersed, and the people were relieved. Early in the morning, Ling Shoren came to Duanhe Hall to deal with government affairs. Once he stepped into Duanhe Hall, he was immediately refreshed by the fragrance. The dragon table was already filled with 3 large piles of memorials. He estimated that it would take an entire morning to finish reading them. This was under the condition that he was an enlightened master and was full of energy. If it was before he became an enlightened master, he would need to spend an entire day or even midnight before he could sleep. The palace maids walked lightly, afraid to disturb him. After he sat down, they served him tea and retreated. Bam! Ling Shoren flipped through 2 memorials and smashed them. In the palace, he tried his best to restrain the enlightened master field. The palace maids around him were ordinary people and could not withstand the enlightened master field. Their lives would be in danger if they encountered the enlightened master field. That was why the memorials were not smashed into pieces. A slightly plump old guard with white eyebrows and beard walked up and picked up the memorials. He placed them back on the table and said in a low voice, "Your Majesty, it's not worth getting angry and hurting your body." Ding Rui, don't you think it's infuriating? Ling Shoren gritted his teeth. These celestials are lawless. Do they think I can't control them? Sigh. Ding Rui shook his head and said, "These celestial beings are really too mischievous, but your Majesty really can't do anything to them. He can't kill them personally, and the guards of the Imperial House can't do anything to them. Let the people from the Secret Guardians Hall go." Ling Shoren scoffed. Ding Rui said, "Ever since Commander Meng passed away, the Secret Guardians Hall is in a mess. There's really no suitable person to take over." Useless people. Ling Shoren snorted angrily. Ding Rui shook his head and said, "The pearl is right in front of us, no one dares to disgrace themselves." Leng Shoren narrowed his eyes as a cold light flashed in his eyes. "Ding Rui, you've received money from the Ren public house, haven't you?" Naturally, he could tell what it meant to have a gem in front of him. Ever since Lu Yurong took over, the Secret Guardians Hall had taken on a new look, and their power had increased tremendously. However, ever since Lu Yurong was removed, the Secret Guardians Hall's morale had waned, and they were no longer as effective as before. The masters that Lu Yurong had recruited were no longer contributing. Ding Rui smiled. "Your Majesty, I don't dare to accept money. I just can't bear to see Your Majesty working so hard. If Commander Lu was here, Your Majesty would be very carefree." Sigh. Leng Shoren looked at his calm expression, and his initial vigilance relaxed. He knew Ding Rui's temperament very well. He would never accept money to speak up for others. His words had indeed struck a chord in his heart. Whenever Lu Yurong was mentioned, he would always feel a trace of annoyance and resentment. He gritted his teeth, and once again Chu Li's detestable face appeared. "Your Majesty, why don't you ask Commander Lu to come out of seclusion again?" Ding Rui said, "I don't think Lady Lu is willing to take care of her husband and children." "That's impossible." Leng Shoren shook his head, and put away his disappointed expression. He hardened his heart again. "I can still take it. Where's Feng Er?" "The prince is hunting in the enclosure, and there are many crown princes and imperial guards following him," Ding Rui said. Leng Shoren nodded. He was disappointed. Feng Er was indeed not suitable to be an emperor. His heart was not firm enough, and he did not have a sense of responsibility towards the Leng family and the great Ji dynasty. He did not care about anything, and everything came too easily. He was not like himself, who was so worried about his position. Suddenly, footsteps were heard, and they landed outside the basilica in a hurry. Ding Rui bowed slightly and left. A moment later, Ding Rui came in with a solemn expression and knelt on the ground. "Your Majesty, the prince has been murdered." "Hmm?" Leng Shoren frowned at him. "Murdered?" "An immortal broke into the enclosure, killed the prince, and then self-destructed," Ding Rui said with tears in his eyes. "Impossible." Leng Shoren waved his hand and frowned. "Nonsense, how can you make a mistake in something like this? It's impossible for Feng Er to die. As an enlightened master, he could sense his own bloodline. If Leng Feng was in danger, he would be able to sense it and immediately rush over to solve the problem. There must be a mistake." Ding Rui touched his head to the ground and slowly said, "Your Majesty, it's absolutely true. How would I dare to speak nonsense about something like this?" "Feng Er is really dead?" Leng Shoren frowned. Everyone saw the prince ascend to the realm beyond heaven with their own eyes. Ding Rui raised his head and slowly said, "It can't be wrong, Your Majesty. These immortals must have used some kind of secret technique or some kind of treasure to block Your Majesty's senses." Leng Shoren was still skeptical, but he trusted his own intuition more. Ding Rui saw that he was in a daze, and only touched his head to the ground, not daring to disturb him. The Emperor was in the most danger at this time. If he lost control and released his divine field, who knew how many people in the imperial house would suffer? Bang! Leng Shoren suddenly slammed his palm on the dragon table. The dragon table sank without a sound, as if it had turned into sand and collapsed. The memorials on the ground also turned into powder, silently merging with the powder that the dragon table had turned into. It was hard to tell them apart. He could no longer sense Leng Feng's existence, and there was indeed a treasure or secret technique blocking his senses. Ding Rui's words were true. "Your Majesty, please calm down," Ding Rui hurriedly said. "Although the prince is dead, he is still in the realm beyond heaven. It is not impossible for father and son to be reunited. Your Majesty, you must not lose your mind." Ling Shoren stared at Ding Rui and spat out 4 words, "My ass." Ding Rui quickly kowtowed and did not say a word. Ling Shoren slowly said, "Bring me there." "Yes." Ding Rui quickly stood up, bowed and walked out, leading the way. Ding Rui did not seem to know martial arts, but he was a top-notch master at the peak of the Grandmaster's boundary. His feet fluttered as if the ground had shrunk to an inch, and he was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he was out of the Imperial House and arrived at the Imperial enclosure outside the city. At this time, the Imperial enclosure was heavily guarded, and the Imperial Guards had surrounded it tightly. More than half of the Imperial House protectors had been deployed. There were more than 10 young people huddled at the edge of the forest, and a group of horses followed them. Some of them looked calm, some suppressed their fear, and some looked sad, but it was unknown whether they were faking it or they were really showing their true emotions. When they saw the Emperor, they all bowed. Ling Shoren's eyes were cold. He waved his hand and asked them what happened. From their narration, Ling Shoren had a clear idea of what happened. 3 celestial beings suddenly broke into the enclosure and assassinated Ling Feng. Then, the 3 celestial beings suddenly lit up, and turned into 3 rays of light that shot up to the realm beyond heaven. Chapter 1837. Ling Shoren listened to their narration and waved his hand, signaling them to leave. Everyone felt as if they had been pardoned and quickly left. At first, they thought that even if they did not die, they would be severely punished. After all, it was related to the prince's assassination, and every one of them was a major suspect. They would be interrogated repeatedly until the real murderer was found. They did not expect the Emperor to let them go so easily. Ding Rui wanted to say something but stopped when he saw Ling Shoren's gloomy face and immediately shut his mouth. Ling Shoren waved his hand. Ding Rui nodded lightly and walked to a burly man and whispered a few words to him. Soon, all the Imperial Guards and protectors of the Imperial House left and the huge enclosure became empty. Only the sound of the wind blowing through the trees could be heard. Ling Shoren stood beside the dense forest without saying a word and only looked up at the sky. Ding Rui stood beside him and breathed softly so as not to disturb him. After a while, Ding Rui saw that he was still in a daze and called out softly, "Your Majesty? Your Majesty?" "Yes." Ling Shoren looked up at the sky and said slowly, "Ding Rui, do you think that I'm useless as an emperor?" "Your Majesty, why do you say that?" Ding Rui quickly shook his head. "Your Majesty is wise and wise. Which minister in the imperial court does not respect you?" Sigh. Ling Shoren shook his head. "I'm really useless as an emperor. It's really boring." Ding Rui advised, "Your Majesty, although the prince is dead, he did not reincarnate nor did his soul disappear. He has only gone to the outland. Your Majesty can still see him. There's no need to be sad." "Ha ha!" Ling Shoren laughed and sighed. "As an emperor, I can't even protect my own son. What's the point of being an emperor? You should go back first. I want to walk alone." "Your Majesty, please don't hurt my body." Ding Rui bowed and retreated. Ling Shoren suddenly disappeared from the side of the forest. The next moment, he appeared in a forest outside of Chongming Town. He originally wanted to directly teleport to the public house, but found that there was an invisible force blocking his senses. He could not teleport directly. This was obviously Chu Li's doing. He did not know what treasured weapon was used. Ordinary formations were unable to be used against enlightened masters. Formations that could block enlightened masters were almost extinct. Beyond Heaven did not allow such formations to exist in order to establish the supreme prestige of enlightened masters. He arrived at the outskirts of Chongming Town and looked at it from afar. He could feel the prosperity of Chongming Town. He shook his head. This little-known Chongming Town actually had the shadow of the fairies' capital. With a few strides, he passed through Chongming Town and arrived outside the High Duke's public house. Then, without the protectors noticing, he glided into the public house. Just as he was about to look for Chu Li's courtyard, he suddenly turned around and saw Chu Li standing not far away, quietly watching him. He gave a fist salute. "Chu Li, I would like to have a chat with you." "Your Majesty, please." Chu Li nodded and glided away. The two of them walked on the waves and arrived at his small island. Initially, he was not in the public house. He was at Goddess Attraction Mountain, but when he sensed the fluctuation of the formation in the public house, he immediately rushed back and saw Ling Shoren. The two of them arrived at a gazebo on the island and sat down. Xue Ling's white clothes fluttered like snow as she approached them and curtsied. "Young master." "Brew some tea," Chu Li said. Xue Ling nodded and bowed at Ling Shoren before leaving. Ling Shoren nodded and looked at Chu Li. "I'm here to make a deal with you." Chu Li said, "Your Majesty, please speak your mind." His feelings toward Emperor Ling Shoren were rather complicated. If it was Ling Wufeng, he would have killed him long ago. Even if Ling Wufeng was not the Ji dynasty's emperor, he could not kill Ling Shoren as he was unable to do so. The key was his weakness of being soft-hearted. As an emperor, soft-hearted was indeed a fatal weakness, but to others it was an advantage. It showed that he still had humanity. He was not just an emperor, an enlightened master, or a normal person. When Ling Shoren used Shaoqi as a threat, Chu Li immediately killed him. However, he could swear because of Ling Zhifei. Chu Li restrained his killing intent, so he could live for a while longer. He decided to kill Ling Shoren the next time he angered him. Ling Shoren said, "I want to abdicate and ascend to heaven. I want Suan to succeed me." Chu Li smiled. "Your Majesty, why are you in such a hurry to ascend? I've had enough of this position." Ling Shoren laughed self-deprecatingly. "Before I got the throne, I tried to seize it at all costs. However, now that I'm in this position, I realized that it's not as good as I imagined. It's not as free as I thought it would be. Instead, it's more painful and uncomfortable. I should have been a prince back then." Chu Li said, "Abdicate because of this? You must be joking, Your Majesty." If someone else said this, he would not believe it. However, when Ling Shoren said it, he somewhat believed it. This was because Ling Shoren was strong on the outside but weak on the inside. Although he looked solemn and cold on the outside, he was actually weak on the inside. Under extreme circumstances, he would reveal his true colors. "Feng Heir is dead." Ling Shoren laughed bitterly. "As an emperor, I can't protect my own son. Isn't that ridiculous? How can I still be an emperor?" Chu Li said, "Your Majesty, why do you have to be so stubborn? Even the previous emperor couldn't protect King An back then." Ling Shoren shook his head. "He's my only son." Now that he was an enlightened master, his concubines could not have martial arts. Otherwise, they would not be able to withstand his body. However, there were repercussions from the initiation. Even if they could be husband and wife, they could not have children. Chu Li nodded slowly. "Because the prince has ascended, Your Majesty has to follow and take care of him?" "Yes." Ling Shoren nodded slowly. "Chu Li, haven't you been trying hard to push for Suan to succeed the throne?" "I promise you that Suan will succeed the throne." "What about the crown prince?" Chu Li asked. "He can't succeed the throne," Ling Shoren said in a low voice. "I will never allow him to succeed the throne." Chu Li shook his head. "Since he's the crown prince, he naturally has to succeed the throne. Otherwise, what would the world think? What would King Ping do? It seems like you have a close relationship with the crown prince. You're actually willing to give in to him in front of the throne," Ling Shoren said. "It's hard to tell what's in a man's heart. Aren't you afraid that he'll turn against you after he becomes the emperor?" Chu Li shook his head. If he was a grandmaster, he would naturally be afraid. However, as an enlightened master, he believed that King Ping would not act recklessly. More importantly, He had already pushed for King Ping to be the crown prince. If Suan suddenly became the emperor, what would King Ping think? Even if Suan became the emperor, he would still need to rely on King Ping to lead the army. No matter how smart Suan was, he would not be able to lead the army. The Ji dynasty had no divine generals except for King Ping. If Suan could not use King Ping, it would be troublesome for him to be the emperor. It would be better to not do so. As for whether King Ping would be wary of Suan after he became the emperor, it did not matter. If you want him to succeed the throne, you have to promise me something, Leng Shoren scoffed. Otherwise, I'd rather pass the throne to ninth brother. Tell me, Chu Li said. Kill Leng Zhifei. Leng Shoren said. So it's the prince that Leng Zhifei killed. Chu Li came to a sudden realization. He looked at Leng Shoren with pity and sighed. Is this the emperor's family? He dispelled the thought that this was a trap set up by Leng Shoren and Leng Zhifei. If you kill him, I'll pass the throne to King Ping, Leng Shoren said. Alright, I agree, Chu Li said. In a flash, he disappeared on the spot. The next moment, he appeared in King Ping's imperial residence, which was also the crown prince's imperial residence. He took King Ping with him and appeared on his own island. The next moment, he disappeared again. Chapter 1838. Why is the emperor here? King Ping was surprised and closed-fist saluted. He looked around, but Chu Li had already disappeared. He did not recognize this place. He glided to the pagoda and looked around. He immediately saw the vast lake and understood that this was the public house. Leng Shoren did not expect Chu Li to bring King Ping here immediately. He frowned and said, Fourth brother, I've discussed with Chu Li to pass the throne to you. The emperor discussed with Chu Li? King Ping was even more surprised. As far as he knew, the two were enemies. Why would they discuss the throne together? Leng Shoren said, I wanted to pass the throne to Suan, but Chu Li asked you to inherit the throne. King Ping frowned. Leng Shoren said, Then I'll give it to you. I'm going to abdicate the throne anyway. What is the emperor doing? King Ping was even more confused. He felt that the Leng Shoren in front of him was fake. His tone was different and his actions were strange. Leng Shoren scoffed and said, You'll know after this. Just tell me if you want the throne or not. No. King Ping shook his head. Leng Shoren sneered and shook his head. There are only the two of us here. There are no outsiders. Why lie, fourth brother? I really don't want to be the emperor. King Ping said, I'm not being polite. I can tell that being the emperor is not interesting at all. It's more comfortable to be my King Xiaoyao. If it wasn't for Chu Li's kindness, I wouldn't want to be the crown prince. Then you don't want the throne? Leng Shoren frowned. I've already promised Chu Li to pass the throne to you. I'll pass it to Suan, King Ping said. Leng Shoren looked at him from head to toe. He could not understand King Ping's thoughts. He wanted to abdicate the throne because he was tired of everything. There was also the sadness of having no successor after his son died. He only had this thought after becoming the emperor. Before becoming the emperor, he could not resist the temptation of the throne. However, King Ping had never tasted the feeling of supremacy. He must have wanted to, but he refused. It was unreasonable. King Ping said, Passing the throne to Suan now is the best for the Ji dynasty and the Ling clan. I admire fourth brother now, Leng Shoren said slowly. There's nothing to admire. I've already seen through everything after the death of the princess. It doesn't matter, King Ping said calmly. Leng Shoren looked at him and nodded slowly. He was beginning to understand King Ping now. The two brothers were both soft-hearted and affectionate people. However, King Ping was affectionate towards his concubine, while King Ping was soft-hearted towards his son. They were both affected by their emotions and were indeed unsuitable to be the emperor. If that's the case, then let's pass it to Suan. He has the blood of third brother and is also the Arhat, Ling Shoren said. Just as the two of them were talking, Chu Li suddenly appeared. His entire body was surging with a terrifying aura, like a huge wave. However, his face was calm as usual. He smiled at Ling Shoren. Fortunately, I did not fail you. Ling Zhifei has ascended to heaven. Ancestor? King Ping was surprised. Chu Li smiled and said, It seems that the Crown Prince still does not know that Ling Feng was indeed killed by Ling Zhifei. I have already asked about it clearly before I killed him. What a wise and powerful ruler, to kill without batting an eye, even to his own descendant. As he spoke, he shook his head and sighed. He did not expect things to turn out this way. The throne that he had been pursuing was actually right in front of him. He had planned so many things in advance, but they were all useless. Zhuo Feiyang and the others had worked in vain. However, Suen had given up on it. Even if he was an enlightened master, no matter how capable he was, he could not change Su An's mind. Ancestor killed Feng Heir? King Ping frowned. Why? Because Ancestor did not want Feng Heir to inherit the throne. Ling Shoren laughed coldly. He was more in love with you, fourth brother. In the end, it was just as he expected. Perhaps all of this was within Ancestor's calculations. After Ancestor killed Feng Heir, even if he himself was killed, he still wanted to pass the throne to fourth brother. This could very well be part of Ancestor's plan. It was really scary. Chu Li calmly replied, This wasn't part of his plan. He still wants to kill you, the Emperor, so that King Ping can directly inherit the throne. After all, he's the Crown Prince. He admires you for coming to look for me in advance, and acting before he does. He's very pleased. Sigh. Why bother? King Ping shook his head and smiled bitterly. Chu Li, I will not be the Emperor. Suen is more suitable. Chu Li shook his head. Don't misunderstand, Your Highness. I am not being polite. The cultivation method that Suen chose is to leave behind the dust. Inheriting the throne will delay his cultivation. Compared to becoming an emperor, he wants to become a Buddha more. King Ping frowned. Being an emperor for less than 60 years won't hinder his cultivation, right? Chu Li sighed. I will try to persuade him again. He suddenly disappeared and appeared at the Symphony Island of the High Duke's public house. Xiao Shi was dressed in a loose white robe. She was quietly cultivating on the couch. When she sensed his appearance, she opened her eyes. Clear light shone and the room seemed to suddenly brighten up. Chu Li said, Go and see Suen and persuade him. Persuade him to become the emperor? Xiao Shi frowned. Chu Li nodded. Now there's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for him. The throne is within his grasp. That's good too. I haven't seen him for a while. Xiao Shi nodded. Chu Li grabbed her wrist and suddenly disappeared. The next moment, he appeared outside the Titanium Temple. The Titanium Temple was still bathed in golden light. To others, it was just a shabby small temple. It was quiet and peaceful. Time seemed to have stopped in this small temple. The vicissitudes of time could be seen on the courtyard walls, but there was no feeling of time passing. There was only tranquility. As soon as he and Xiao Shi appeared, the courtyard door opened. Suen, dressed in a gray robe, slowly walked out. He came before the two and bowed with pressed palms. Chief Chu, Aunt Xiao. Xiao Shi looked at him and pursed her lips into a smile. You've grown taller. I need to make 2 new sets of robes. When Chu Li saw him come out, he knew that a monk in the temple had predicted his arrival. This was not inferior to his heavenly star insight skill. It was probably a divine power similar to the heaven's eye. Divine powers were indeed unique. Suen lowered his head to look at himself and nodded embarrassedly. I heard that you don't want to be the emperor anymore? Xiao Shi scoffed. Suen shook his head. I am cultivating the separation technique. I am in a good state. It is not suitable for me to be an emperor and be lost in the secular world. Whether you are lost or not doesn't depend on whether you are an emperor or not. It depends on your state of mind. Xiao Shi said impatiently. Being an emperor can train your state of mind. It will strengthen your state of mind. If being an emperor hinders your cultivation, then your cultivation will not be stable, and it will be hard for you to reach perfection. Suan said, Master's granduncle once told me that if I become an emperor, I will definitely die. It will delay my life. Xiao Shi frowned. Which master's granduncle? Master's granduncle Tianji. Suan shook his head and said, Martial granduncle Tianji's Heaven's Eye connection has already reached great success. There is no escape for him in the world. Before he became a Buddha, he told me this. That's why I cultivated the method of transcendence, not wanting to delay this life. The 10 lifetimes of Buddhahood required 1 lifetime of cultivation after another. He was still young. If he died so soon, he would delay his life. In the future, the rank of Buddha would drop by 1 level. Compared to this, the throne was insignificant. After all, he was just a passerby of the throne. If that's the case, Xiao Shi nodded. That's fine. Cultivate well. Don't worry about anything else. Suan nodded. Aunt Xiao, the imperial residence has its own fate. There's no need to force yourself. Alright, I know. Go back and cultivate. Xiao Shi patted his shoulder. Suan bowed with pressed palms at Chu Li. He turned around and slowly walked into the courtyard. Chapter 1839. Chu Li smiled. Feeling that Suan has grown up? Yes, the little monk has grown up too. Xiao Shi nodded. Chu Li said, he couldn't bear it, that's why he left in such a hurry. Let's go. Xiao Shi rolled her eyes and scoffed. I know what he's thinking. Chu Li shook his head and laughed. He grabbed her wrist and returned to Symphony Island. Ling Shoren and Ling Shoqian were both there. Chu Li fist saluted and sat down in the gazebo. Your Majesty, Your Highness, Suan won't take over the throne. He wants to become a Buddha and the throne is insignificant to him. He prefers the life in the Titanium Temple. Forget it, let him be. Such a strong Buddha nature. Ling Shoren sighed. Fine, if that's the case, we won't force him. Let's pass the throne to 4th brother. But since 4th brother is in a hurry, it's best for you to accept the enlightenment technique before ascending the throne. Of course. Chu Li nodded. King Ping's martial arts was not high, so his achievement as an enlightened master would be limited. Enlightenment? King Ping said, I don't think that's necessary. If you don't want to be bullied after you become the emperor, you still have to do it. Ling Shoren said, but there's a risk with enlightenment. It's possible that you won't be able to have an heir. 4th brother, you don't have a child yet, King Ping pondered. Chu Li said, then let's wait. It won't be too late to wait until Consort Ping is pregnant. Ling Shoren nodded. That's for the best. I've suffered this before. I hope 4th brother will reconsider. From the bottom of his heart, he did not want to hand over the throne to King Ping. However, since he had already made the vow, he would naturally abide by it. Moreover, he was disheartened and did not hate King Ping that much. However, it was also a pleasure to be able to drag things out for a while and whet King Ping's appetite. King Ping sighed. Then let's wait. Chu Li said, 2 months. Your Highness, we can't delay it for too long. All right. King Ping nodded slowly. Chu Li then sent the 2 off. When he returned to his island, he was filled with guilt. He had worked hard for nothing. In the end, the throne did not fall to Suan. It was a blessing that it fell to King Ping. At least he did not have to worry about the rear and could focus on his work. Young master, Li Meng is here. Xue Ling came and whispered. Chu Li raised his eyebrows. Xue Ling said softly, she disguised herself and came here quietly. Bring him to me. Chu Li frowned. He carefully sensed that nothing had happened to Sun Mingyue. Why did Li Meng come here so sneakily? Shui came in with a handsome young man. This handsome young man strode forward with a straight back and a dignified appearance. There was no trace of makeup on him, and no one could tell that he was Li Meng in disguise. Chu Li nodded in satisfaction. Martial Uncle Chu, can my disguise fool others? Li Meng proudly turned around and replied with a smile. Her voice was sweet and melodious. Chu Li smiled. That's right. Sit down and talk. I'll just stand, Li Meng said. Does your master have something important to tell me? Chu Li did not force the issue and went straight to the point. Master sent me here to pass on a message to tell Masters Junior Chu not to go to the Great Light Peak for the time being. It's because a great grandmaster has come to Great Light Peak. Li Meng curled her lips and scoffed. This great grandmaster has ordered Master to cut off all ties with you, Masters Junior Chu. A celestial being? Chu Li asked. Li Meng slowly nodded. Chu Li frowned and stood up to pace with his hands behind his back. Li Mengwu's big round eyes stared at his figure, following his movements and turning her eyes. He's not here with good intentions. This great grandmaster wants your master to kill me, right? Chu Li asked. Li Meng hesitated for a moment and nodded. Chu Li said, Your master strongly disagreed, but your great grandmaster was too aggressive and took out the sex order, so your master had no choice but to take a step back and stop contacting me. Am I right? Li Meng nodded vigorously. She could not help but secretly praise Masters Junior Chu for being so smart. Chu Li did not read her thoughts and only speculated. Looks like the Li dynasty really wants to join forces with the Jing dynasty to fight against the Ji dynasty. Yes. Li Meng hesitated for a moment and slowly nodded. She was siding with her family and not with reason. Even though she was from the Li dynasty, she still acknowledged the news. Chu Li sighed. It's been hard on your master. On one side was the sex order, and on the other side was him. Sun Mingyue must be under a lot of pressure to be caught in the middle. Fortunately, she had a steady personality and could withstand the pressure. She even secretly sent Li Meng to inform him. Li Meng sighed. It's really hard on Master. Chu Li nodded. Anything else? Also, Master told you to be careful of one person, Li Meng said. Li Meng said, He is Dong Guangyi, the Jing dynasty's newly appointed heavenly god, a genius disciple of Black Tortoise Mountain. Master said that this Dong Guangyi is a proud son of heaven, and his luck is exceptionally good. You must be careful. Not inferior to me? Chu Li asked. Li Meng nodded. Chu Li pondered. Dong Guangyi, he had never heard of this person before. When he was the commander of the Secret Guardians Hall, he had a deep understanding of the Jing dynasty. There was no master named Dong Guangyi in the Black Tortoise Mountain. This meant that Dong Guangyi suddenly rose to power. He must have had a fortuitous encounter or cultivated hard for decades to amaze everyone. I heard Master say that there's a big shot among the Celestials behind Dong Guangyi, Li Meng said. His martial arts is excellent and his cultivation level is high. I'm afraid he'll become a strong opponent for you, Masters Junior Chu. You must not be careless. Chu Li smiled and nodded. Oh right. Li Meng clapped her hands and quickly said, I almost forgot to mention that Dong Guangyi is also very young. He's about the same age as you, Masters Junior Chu. Chu Li smiled. That's interesting. Li Meng said, Anyway, Master seriously told me to be careful of this person. I don't want to fail miserably and ruin my reputation. Chu Li smiled and nodded. The title of the world's #1 master had always been a joke. Who would dare to call themselves the world's #1? He had never thought of himself as such. Li Meng hesitated for a while and said softly, Master also said that you shouldn't get involved in the matters between the Ji dynasty and the Jing dynasty. Chu Li was stunned. Li Meng nodded. That's what Master said, and he didn't look too good. Not good. Chu Li pondered. Sun Mingyue should know his temperament. He would never stand by and watch innocent people suffer in a war. He would definitely stop the war from happening. However, she warned him not to get involved. There must be an inside story, but she could not say it out loud. Chu Li had to speculate. Sun Mingyue must have told him not to get involved for his own good. If that was the case, it would be dangerous for him to get involved. It meant that the Jing dynasty and the Li dynasty were very powerful, and he was no match for them. It seemed that Dong Guangyi was indeed a strong opponent. He even had a powerful celestial being. Anything else? Chu Li asked gently. Li Meng shook her head. No, that's all. All right, I understand. Chu Li smiled. Tell your master not to worry. I know what I'm doing. Master advises you not to mess around. We can't stop a war between countries, Li Meng quickly said. Chu Li smiled. Li Meng knew that he did not listen to her when she saw his smile. She became anxious. Master can't be wrong. Master's Junior Chu, please listen to me. Chu Li said, I'll try my best. Chapter 1840. As he was talking to Li Meng, Xue's white robe fluttered over, bringing with it a faint fragrance. She whispered, Master, I've received news that the Jing dynasty has declared war on the Ji dynasty. I heard that the border has begun to gather troops. Chu Li stood up immediately. Xue said, The Ji dynasty has just retracted their declaration of war and the Jing dynasty has declared war. Master, this time. She shook her head gently. Chu Li took a deep breath and sneered, These celestial beings can't wait. He guessed that the celestial beings had received the news of Ling Zhifei's death and knew that they could not fight, so they took the initiative to declare war. Xue whispered, Master, the Jing dynasty might have their own reasons. The Zheng dynasty has been developing all these years and the Fu dynasty wanted to stop them, but they encountered you and suffered many setbacks. They had no time to stop the Zheng dynasty and allowed the Zheng dynasty to develop. When the Fu dynasty's emperor is weak, they will definitely not let go of this opportunity to rise. Chu Li glanced at Xue. He did not expect her to grow to this stage. She was indeed very talented. Li Meng quickly said, Master's Junior Chu, don't forget what Master said. Chu Li looked at Li Meng and smiled. Do you want me to sit here and wait for the Jing dynasty's army to attack? He had just pacified the Ji dynasty. His original plan was to go to the Jing dynasty's imperial family to pacify this side and the other side. It was impossible to stop fighting if one side was suppressed. He did not expect the Jing dynasty to declare war one step ahead. Li Meng said, Master's Junior Chu, you can't stop the Jing dynasty. How will you know if you don't try? Chu Li said. He turned around and asked, Xue, do you have the longevity grass? Yes, I found 3. Xue nodded and said, I've planted them in the courtyard. Chu Li smiled in satisfaction. 3 is enough. Give it to me. Yes, Xue replied and fluttered away. Master's Junior Chu, are you going to the Jing dynasty? Li Meng asked helplessly. Chu Li smiled as a tacit agreement. Sigh. Li Meng felt that she was so useless. She could not even persuade Chu Li. If only her master was here, it would be great. Unfortunately, her master did not dare to come over. The great master was too fierce and watched over him too closely. Otherwise, he would not have sent her to sneak over. Chu Li smiled. Why are you sighing at such a young age? Go back quickly and don't let Master Xing find you. I will be careful. All right. Li Meng could only stand up, curtsied, and left. She had to tell her master this news as soon as possible. By the time Chu Li stood in the Jing dynasty's capital, Saint's Peace City, it was already 2 days later. It was the first time he came to St. Peace City, so he couldn't teleport here directly. He had to use his Qing Gong according to the map. Xing and City was like a giant beast entrenched under a towering snow-capped peak. One could only see the snow halfway up the snow-capped peak, but not the upper half hidden in the clouds. Compared to the towering snow-capped mountain, the huge San and city didn't seem that huge. Chu Li stood in front of Saint's Peace City, and felt a chill. It was not the cold wind that blew from the snowy mountains, but a chill that came from his bones. It was an inexplicable sense of danger. His instinct told him to leave this place and not enter. Chu Li's omniscient mirror spread out and enveloped Saint's Peace City, allowing him to see the entire city. Saint's Peace City was built in an ancient style, similar to that of the Great Li dynasty. However, compared to the Great Li dynasty, it was less exquisite and more fierce. One could tell at a glance that the people in the city were tough and good at fighting. They were all natural warriors. Chu Li frowned slightly. This was the same as the information from the secret Guardians Hall. However, after seeing it with his own eyes, he realized that the information was not exaggerated enough. Instead, it was understated. The Zheng dynasty's imperial court was definitely very aggressive with such a courageous people. To be able to hide their strength for so long, it was obvious that they had a big plan. It seemed like the Zheng dynasty's war this time was not purely instigated by the Celestials. It was also the Zheng dynasty's own will. It seemed like they had to kill the emperor. With a murderous intent, he used the omniscient mirror to envelop the Zheng dynasty's imperial palace. However, as soon as the omniscient mirror shone, the Zheng dynasty's imperial palace suddenly flashed with a green light. Then, the imperial palace disappeared from the omniscient mirror as if it did not exist. He could not sense it no matter what. It was extremely strange. Chu Li frowned. The imperial palace was obviously protected by a treasure that could isolate it from prying eyes. It was better than the Ji dynasty. He could not find out the truth, but he felt a sense of dread toward the imperial palace. After some thought, he looked up to the sky and roared. His roar was like thunder. Where is the Zheng dynasty's emperor? Chu Li is here. Since he knew that there was danger, he would not force his way in. He was not arrogant enough to think that he was invincible. His instincts would not lie. Chu Li is here. Where is the Zheng dynasty's emperor, Zheng Donglai? Chu Li shouted in a deep voice. His shout was like a thunderclap that shook the entire Saint's Peace City. The snowy peaks in the distance seemed to start sliding down ice and snow. He had gathered the enlightened master's power in his shout. Its power was astonishing. If one were to get close, even a grandmaster would be shocked to death. Chu Li, how dare you! Amidst the roar, a yellow figure appeared in the sky. His bright yellow robe shone with golden light under the sun. The Zheng dynasty's emperor, Zheng Donglai, was a tall and burly middle-aged man. He had a protruding nose and a square mouth. His forehead was full and wide, and his eyes were merciless and cold. He looked at Chu Li eerily, making people shudder. Chu Li looked up and smiled at Zheng Donglai. Your Majesty must have many masters lying in ambush in the imperial palace, right? That's right. I admire you for daring to come here. Unfortunately, this is a dead end. Zheng Donglai stood in the void with his hands behind his back. He shook his head proudly. Since you're here, don't even think about going back. As soon as he finished speaking, silhouettes suddenly appeared in the void around him. 12 silhouettes surrounded Chu Li. Chu Li's expression changed slightly. His omniscient mirror saw Sun Mingyue behind him. Sun Mingyue was covered with a white veil. Her clothes were as white as snow, revealing only a pair of bright eyes. Beside her was a woman dressed similarly. Her clothes were also as white as snow. A white veil covered her face, revealing only a pair of clear eyes. However, Chu Li could recognize her at a glance. Sun Mingyue's phoenix-like eyes revealed a complicated expression, but she remained silent. Chu Li quickly regained his composure. He glanced at the 12 people around him, and his gaze stopped on the face of a young man. This young man was burly but not tall. His appearance was not too handsome either. He was only slightly better than the average person. He looked like a straightforward young man. He was not scheming and was outspoken. With a glance, he could clearly see who was a celestial and who was an enlightened master. As for grandmasters, they were not qualified to stand in front of him at all. 8 rank 2 celestials and 4 enlightened masters. I'm really shocked. Chu Li withdrew his gaze and looked at Jing Donglai. He said calmly, "You want to kill me just like that?" Among the 4 enlightened masters, one was Sun Mingyue, another was the emperor of the Li dynasty, and another was Jing Donglai. The last one was that young man. He must be the Jing dynasty's new enlightened master, Dong Guangyi, whom Li Meng had mentioned. His cultivation level was indeed profound. At first glance, he seemed to be on par with Jing Donglai. This was somewhat shocking. Jing Donglai had obtained all kinds of fortuitous encounters and his own talent. How could Dong Guangyi have reached this level? He did not look like a very smart person. Could it be that his luck was better than his? What was even stranger was where did so many rank 2 celestials come from? As far as he knew, rank 2 celestials were all important people. It was not easy to gather 8 of them. This showed how capable Jing Donglai was. If you can escape, then you'll be the world's #1 master, Jing Donglai said in a low voice. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.